The wind didn't howl. That would have been mercy. Instead, it hissed across the frozen prairie like something alive and hunting, stripping warmth from anything foolish enough to stand against it. The kind of cold that turned breath to ice crystals before they hit the ground. The kind that killed slowly, then all at once. Mara Vance had stopped feeling her feet an hour ago. Maybe two. Time moved differently when you were dying. She crouched beside the broken wagon wheel, her hands, cracked and bleeding despite the rags wrapped around them, working the frozen bolt for the 100th time. It wouldn't turn. Hadn't turned yesterday. Wouldn't turn tomorrow if there was a tomorrow. The metal had seized in the cold, fused to the axle like the prairie itself had decided this was where her journey ended. Mama? Eli's voice cut through the wind, 7 years old and already trying to sound brave. She didn't turn around. Couldn't let him see her face right now, see how close she was to the edge. Just a minute, sweetheart. Mama? Rowan's shaking real bad. That made her turn. Her sons huddled against the wagon's leeward side, wrapped in every blanket and coat she'd been able to pile on them. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Rowan's lips had gone purple at the edges, his small body trembling despite Eli's arms locked tight around him. They looked like a painting she'd seen once in St. Louis, angels carved from ice, beautiful and doomed. She was supposed to protect them. That's what mothers did. What she'd promised Daniel before the fever took him, before she'd loaded everything they owned into this cursed wagon and pointed it west toward the lie of a better life. Some promise. The fire was nearly dead. She'd been feeding it splinters from the wagon itself, piece by piece, watching their only shelter disappear into smoke. 3 more hours of fuel, maybe 4 if she burned the family Bible. The thought should have horrified her, but she was past horror, past everything except the arithmetic of survival. 4 hours of heat, 2 days to the nearest town if they walked. In this cold, with the boys, the numbers didn't work. They'd never worked. Hey there! Mara's head snapped up. A wagon rolled past on the frozen trace, maybe 30 yards out. A man and woman on the bench seat, their horses plodding steady through the snow. The woman saw her. Mara knew she did, watched her eyes go wide. But the man snapped the reins and they kept moving. Please, Mara's voice cracked. She stumbled forward, waving her arms. Please, my children! The wagon didn't slow. Within minutes, it disappeared into the white haze that passed for a horizon out here, swallowed up like it had never existed at all. Mara stood there, arms still raised, until Eli's voice pulled her back. Mama, are they coming back? She lowered her arm. No, baby, they're not coming back. This was the 3rd wagon. Or 4th. She'd lost count. Each time, the same calculation behind the driver's eyes. Help strangers, risk their own supplies, maybe arrive too late themselves. Each time, survival won over mercy. Mara couldn't even hate them for it. She'd have done the same, probably. Before. Back when she was still the kind of person who got to make choices. She trudged back to the fire and added another slat from the wagon bed. The wood was damp and protested, sending up more smoke than heat, but it caught eventually. Everything caught eventually, given enough desperation. Come here, both of you. The twins shuffled over, Rowan's teeth chattering too hard for speech. She pulled them close, wrapped her own coat around all 3 of them, even though it left her shoulders exposed to the wind. Her body heat was all she had left to give them. When that ran out, tell us the story again, Eli said, about Papa and the river. Sweet boy, I don't think, please, Mama, the one where he's brave. Because children needed brave. Needed to believe the world held more than frozen prairie and broken wagons and mothers who couldn't save them. She closed her eyes, tried to find the words through the cold that had settled into her bones. Your papa, she started, voice rough, stood chest deep in the Mississippi when the ferry cable snapped, water running so fast it would have swept a horse downstream, but he... A sound cut through her story. Hoofbeats. Mara's breath caught. She turned, expecting another wagon that wouldn't stop, another family choosing themselves. That was the world now. That was what the frontier did. Stripped away the pretty lies about human goodness and left only the truth. But this wasn't a wagon. A single rider emerged from the haze, sitting easy on a massive roan horse that should have been impossible in this weather. The animal's breath plumed white in the frozen air, its coat dark with sweat despite the cold. They'd been riding hard, running from something or toward it. The man's coat was real wool, not the threadbare cotton most settlers made do with. Quality leather boots, a hat that had cost more than Mara's entire wagon outfit. Money. the kind of money that didn't usually stop for people like her. He pulled up 10 feet away, and the world seemed to stop with him. The wind, the cold, even her heartbeat, everything went quiet in the space he occupied. He was younger than she'd expected. Mid-30s, maybe, with the kind of face that made you think of carved stone rather than flesh. Strong jaw, weathered by sun and wind, but not broken by it. Dark eyes that took in the scene, broken wagon, dying fire, woman with 2 children wrapped in rags, and revealed nothing. "Wheels seized," he said. Not a question. Mara found her voice somewhere. "Yes." "How long you been here? 2 days?" She straightened, tried to find some dignity in her frozen, desperate state. "We're managing." His eyes moved to the fire, to the splintered wagon planks serving as fuel, to the twins shivering against her sides. One dark eyebrow rose, and something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Or pity. She couldn't tell which was worse. "Looks it," he said. Heat flooded her cheeks, the first warmth she'd felt in hours, and it came from shame. "We don't need charity, mister. I can pay. When we reach, you'll be dead by morning." The words landed like stones, flat, undeniable, true. "The wheel," she tried again. "That wheel's not turning till spring, if then. Axles cracked, bolts fused. You'd need a forge and a full day to fix it proper." He shifted in his saddle, the leather creaking. "This your first winter on the frontier?" She wanted to lie. Wanted to tell him she was frontier-born, that she knew these lands, that her husband hadn't died 6 months ago, leaving her with nothing but fool's hope and a broken wagon. But the twins were shaking, and her pride was a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. "Yes," she whispered. He nodded, like she'd confirmed something he already knew. For a long moment, he just sat there, this stranger on his expensive horse, looking at her like she was a problem he was working through. The wind picked up, howling now, finally, and snow began to fall in earnest. Then he swung down from his saddle. He moved toward the wagon, boots crunching in the frozen snow, and Mara's instinct screamed at her to grab the boys and run. She'd heard stories, women alone on the frontier, men who stopped not to help but to take. Her hand went to the knife in her belt, 8 inches of rusted iron, the only weapon Daniel had left her. The man saw the gesture, stopped, raised his hand, slow and deliberate. "Ma'am," he said, voice careful. "I'm Coulter Reed. I own the cattle operation about 12 miles northwest of here. Reed Ranch. You might have heard of it." She had. Everyone heading west had heard of the Reed Ranch, 20,000 acres, herds that stretched to the horizon, one of the biggest operations in 3 territories, run by a man who'd built an empire from nothing and defended it with iron will and harder fists. "I'm going to check your wagon," Coulter continued, hands still raised. "See what can be saved. That all right with you?" Mara's fingers stayed on the knife. "Why?" "Because you're going to need your things when we ride out." "Ride where?" "My ranch." He said it simple, like offering shelter to dying strangers was something he did every Tuesday. "You and your boys. It's not charity. I need someone to manage my accounts. My last bookkeeper drank himself into the ground 3 months back, and the numbers are a mess. You read? Right?" She nodded, too shocked to speak. "Then you work for keep. Room, board, wages, fair trade." His eyes moved to the twins, and something softened in his face, barely perceptible. "Kids stay warm, stay fed. No one dies on the prairie. That work for you?" It was too easy, too perfect. Men didn't just ride out of blizzards and offer salvation without strings attached. There had to be a catch, a price, something that would cost her more than she could pay. "Mama?" Eli's voice, small and scared. "I'm really cold." The knife fell from her hand. "Yes," Mara said. "Yes, that works." Coulter nodded once, sharp, and moved to the wagon. He worked fast, sorting through their things with the efficiency of a man who knew exactly what mattered. Clothes, tools, the small trunk that held Daniel's watch and her mother's locket. He left the furniture, the fancy dishes she'd been too foolish to abandon in St. Louis, things that had seemed important a lifetime ago. "Your horse?" he asked. "Dead. 3 days back." "Right." He loaded everything worth saving onto his roan, tying it down with practiced knots. The horse barely shifted under the added weight, standing solid as a mountain. "You ever ridden?" "Not really." "You're about to learn. Boys, too." He turned to Eli and Rowan, crouching down to their level. His voice, when he spoke to them, lost some of its hard edge. You two know how to hold on tight? Rowan just stared, but Eli nodded, trying to look brave. Good. You'll ride with me, and you'll hold on like your life depends on it. Because it does. Understand? Another nod. Your mother rides behind. If any of you fall, we all stop, so don't fall. He stood, looked at Mara. Can you mount? She tried. Made it halfway before her frozen legs gave out and she stumbled. Coulter caught her, his hands solid on her waist, holding her upright, and for a second they stood like that, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Sorry, she managed. Don't be. He lifted her like she weighed nothing, settling her into the saddle behind the boys. Arms around them, hold tight, don't let go for anything. She wrapped her arms around Eli and Rowan, felt them pressed against her, real and alive and warm. Coulter swung up in front, his broad back blocking the worst of the wind, and gathered the reins. 12 miles, he said, not looking back. We'll make it by dark if we push. You feel yourself slipping, you call out. Hear me? I hear you. The horse moved beneath them, smooth and powerful, carrying all of them like it was nothing. Mara looked back once, at the wagon that had been their whole world, now just a broken shape disappearing into the snow. Everything they'd owned, everything they'd been, gone. But the boys were warm against her chest, still breathing, still alive. Maybe that was enough. The ride to Reed Ranch existed in a blur of cold and motion and fear that felt almost like flying. Mara had never been on a horse this powerful, never moved this fast across land that wanted to kill her. Coulter rode like he was part of the animal, adjusting to every shift in the snow, every gust of wind that tried to knock them sideways. The twins pressed against her, trusting in a way that broke her heart, and she held on because letting go meant death and she'd lost too much already. The land changed as they rode. The flat, killing emptiness gave way to rolling hills, then shallow valleys where pine trees stood dark against the snow. Signs of life appeared, fence posts, cattle huddled together for warmth, the distant shape of outbuildings against the horizon. Then the house rose up out of the twilight like something from a dream. 3 stories of timber and stone, solid and permanent in a way Mara had forgotten buildings could be. Light glowed in the windows, warm and yellow, promising heat and safety and all the things she'd stopped believing in. Smoke curled from 2 chimneys, carried away by the wind that had tried to kill them hours ago. Coulter pulled the horse up in front of the main entrance, a wide porch with railings carved from whole logs, and dismounted in one smooth motion. He reached up for Rowan first, lifting the boy down gentle despite the child's trembling, then Eli. Both twins could barely stand, their legs stiff from the ride. Can you walk? Coulter asked them. Eli nodded. Rowan just leaned against his brother, eyes half closed. Inside, then. Doors open. Follow the hall to the big room with the fire. The boys stumbled toward the entrance, supporting each other, and disappeared into the light. Coulter turned to Mara, offered his hand. She took it, slid down from the saddle on legs that felt like wooden posts, barely holding her weight. The ground seemed to shift under her feet, solid earth feeling wrong after hours of movement. Easy. Coulter's hand stayed on her elbow, steadying her. Take a minute. The boys will be fine. Sarah's in there. She'll get them warm. Sarah? Housekeeper. Been with my family since I was 10. He guided her toward the porch, still holding her arm like he thought she might collapse. Maybe she would. Come on. Cold's still trying to kill you. The warmth hit her the moment she stepped inside. Real heat, the kind that came from massive fireplaces and solid walls that kept the wind out. Mara's body didn't know what to do with it. She stood in the entrance hall, dripping melting snow onto polished wood floors, shaking for entirely new reasons. This way. Coulter led her down a hallway lined with oil paintings, landscapes, cattle, stern-faced people who must have been his family, and into a room that seemed impossible. 2 stories high, dominated by a fireplace you could have roasted a whole steer in. Leather furniture. Thick rugs. Windows that looked out onto the snow-covered range, framed by curtains that probably cost more than everything Mara had owned in her life. Eli and Rowan sat on the floor in front of the fire, wrapped in blankets 3 times too big for them. A woman in her 60s knelt beside them, her weathered hands checking them over with the efficiency of long practice. She had kind eyes and a face that had seen hard things without letting it make her hard. Frostbite? Coulter asked. Fingers and toes, mild. Nothing permanent if we warm them slow. Sarah looked up at Mara, taking her measure in a single glance. The mother? Mara Vance. She'll be staying on, managing the books. Something passed across Sarah's face too quick to read. Surprise, maybe, or concern. But she just nodded and stood, brushing off her knees. I'll get a room ready, the blue one. That'll work. And send someone for their things. They're still on smoke. Already done. James is bringing them in now. Sarah moved past Mara, pausing to touch her shoulder. You're safe here, girl. We'll get you sorted. Then she was gone, leaving Mara alone with the stranger who'd saved their lives and whose motives she still couldn't read. Coulter crossed to a cabinet against the far wall, poured something amber into 2 glasses. He brought one to Mara, pressed it into her hands. Whiskey, he said. Drink it slow. Warm you from the inside. She'd never had whiskey in her life. Daniel had been against spirits, said they led men to ruin. But Daniel was dead and she was alive, and the liquid in the glass smelled like fire and oak and things she didn't have names for. She drank. It burned all the way down, but the burn felt good, felt real, felt like proof she was still capable of feeling anything. Thank you, she said, voice rough from the whiskey and the cold and everything else. For stopping, for all of this. Coulter settled into one of the leather chairs, his own glass cradled in hands that looked like they'd seen hard work despite the obvious wealth. Told you, it's not charity. I need a bookkeeper. You could have hired someone in town, someone who knew what they were doing. Could have. He took a slow sip of whiskey, eyes on her over the rim of the glass. Didn't. The twins had fallen asleep by the fire, wrapped together like puppies, safe and warm for the first time in days. Mara watched them breathe, steady and even, and felt something crack open inside her chest. I won't let you down, she said quietly. The books. Whatever you need. I'll earn this. I know you will. He set his glass aside, stood. Sarah will get you settled. Breakfast is at 6. You'll start work after, if you're up to it. I'll be up to it. He nodded, started toward the door, then stopped, turned back. Mrs. Vance? Yes? Out there on the prairie, that knife you reached for. His eyes held hers, dark and unreadable. You would have used it, wouldn't you, if you'd thought I meant harm? Mara didn't hesitate. Yes. Something that might have been respect flickered across his face. Good. Don't lose that. You're going to need it. Then he was gone, his boots heavy on the wooden floors, leaving her alone with her sleeping sons and a glass of whiskey and the impossible fact of still being alive. The room Sarah showed them to was bigger than the entire tent Mara and Daniel had shared on the trail west. A real bed. Not a cot, not a bedroll, but an actual bed with a mattress and quilts piled so high you needed a step to climb in. A washstand with fresh water. A window that looked out over the ranch, dark shapes of buildings visible in the moonlight. Boys can share the bed, Sarah said, already turning down the covers. There's a cot we can bring in for you, or the floor's fine. Mara couldn't imagine sleeping in that bed anyway, couldn't reconcile it with the woman who'd been dying on the prairie that morning. I've slept on worse. Nonsense. I'll have James bring up the cot. You need rest, proper rest, if you're going to be worth anything tomorrow. Sarah's hands worked efficiently, stripping the twins out of their frozen clothes, checking their extremities again for damage. Mr. Reed's serious about the bookkeeping. The accounts are a disaster. His last man was gifted with numbers but cursed with a love of grain alcohol. Not a good combination. I can manage numbers. Can you manage Mr. Reed? The question caught Mara off guard. I don't understand. Sarah looked at her, really looked at her, and Mara saw calculation behind the kindness. He's a good man. Hard, but fair. Built this ranch from nothing after his father drank away most of the family fortune and his mother died trying to birth a 3rd child. He was 17, had nothing but debt and 1,000 acres of scrubland. Now look at it. Mara looked. Through the window, even in darkness, you could feel the weight of what Coulter Reed had built. The solid structures, the organized efficiency. Empire carved from wilderness through will alone. But he's been alone a long time, Sarah continued. Shut himself off after, well, that's not my story to tell. Point is, people here depend on him. This ranch feeds 40 families, supports half the businesses in town. We need him steady, focused. You understand what I'm saying? You think I'm a distraction. I think you're a widow with 2 children and no prospects. And Mr. Reed just brought you into his home based on a skill you haven't proven and a situation that could have been resolved a dozen other ways. Sarah's voice stayed gentle, but the warning underneath was clear. So yes, Mrs. Vance, I think you could be a distraction, and distractions get people hurt out here. Mara lifted her chin, found the spine that had kept her alive through Daniel's death, and the journey west and 2 days freezing on the prairie. I'm here to work, to keep my son safe. Nothing more. Good. See that it stays that way. Sarah moved to the door, paused with her hand on the frame. That said, you need anything for yourself or the boys, you come find me. This ranch can be a good home. It can also eat people alive if they're not careful. Learn which parts to trust and which to fear, and you'll do fine. After she left, Mara sat on the cot James had brought up and watched her son sleep. Eli had his arm thrown over Rowan, protective, even unconscious. They looked small in that big bed, swallowed by quilts and safety, and all the things she'd been unable to give them. She thought about Sarah's warning, about Coulter Reed and whatever story he carried that wasn't hers to know, about the fact that she was here, in this room, because a man had chosen mercy when the world had chosen to pass her by. What did he want? Men didn't save strangers for nothing. There was always a price, always a catch. She just had to figure out what it was before the bill came due. Outside, the wind howled against the window, but it couldn't reach them. Not anymore. They were inside, safe, warm. And Mara Vance, who'd learned to trust nothing and no one, fell asleep wondering if maybe, just maybe, she'd been wrong about the world being empty of mercy. The answer would come. One way or another, it always did. Morning came with the smell of coffee and bacon, scent so foreign to Mara's recent memory that for a moment she thought she was dreaming. Then Rowan shifted in the big bed, mumbling something about being warm, and reality crashed back. They were at Reed Ranch. They'd survived the night. Now came the part where she had to prove she belonged here. She dressed quickly in the dim pre-dawn light, pulling on the cleanest dress she had left, which wasn't saying much. The fabric was worn thin at the elbows, patched in 3 places, and carried the stains of 100 miles of hard travel. Next to the quality of everything in this house, she looked like exactly what she was. Charity case. Refugee. Woman with nothing. The twins still slept, tangled together like they'd been in the womb, and Mara couldn't bring herself to wake them. Let them have a few more hours of warmth and safety before the world demanded they stand up and face it. She found her way downstairs by following the sounds of activity, voices echoing through hallways that seemed to go on forever. The house was even bigger than she'd realized last night, room after room of solid construction and careful maintenance. No dust, no cracks in the plaster. Everything spoke of money, yes, but also of pride. Someone cared about this place deeply enough to keep it perfect. The kitchen sat at the back of the house, a massive space dominated by a cast-iron stove that must have weighed half a ton. Sarah stood at the counter kneading dough, her movements practiced and efficient. A younger woman, couldn't be more than 20, tended the stove, flipping bacon in a pan big enough to feed an army. Morning, Sarah said without looking up. You're early. Breakfast isn't till 6. Couldn't sleep. Mara hovered in the doorway, unsure if she was allowed in this space. Is there something I can do? Help with? You can sit down and stay out of the way. That would help. But Sarah's voice held no real bite. She nodded toward a small table in the corner. Coffee's in the pot, cups in the cabinet above it. Help yourself. The coffee was strong enough to strip paint and tasted like heaven. Mara wrapped both hands around the tin cup, letting the heat seep into her palms, and watched the 2 women work. They moved around each other with the ease of long practice, Sarah calling out instructions, the younger woman responding without hesitation. A team. A rhythm built over years. That's Jenny, Sarah said, catching Mara's gaze. My niece. Been here 3 years. Does most of the cooking now, though she'd set fire to water when she first arrived. Jenny turned, spatula in hand, and grinned. Auntie loves that story. Tells it at least once a week. Because it's funny and true. Sarah shaped the dough into loaves, set them aside to rise. Jenny, this is Mrs. Vance. She'll be managing the books. The books? Jenny's eyebrows rose. Mr. Reed finally admitted he needed help with those? Miracles do happen. Watch your mouth, Sarah said mildly, and flip that bacon before it burns. The door swung open and Coulter walked in, followed by 2 men in work clothes that had seen hard use. He looked different in daylight. Still solid, still commanding, but somehow more real. Less like the mysterious savior from yesterday and more like a man with too much on his shoulders and not enough hours to carry it. Morning, Sarah. Jenny. His eyes found Mara in the corner. Mrs. Vance? You sleep all right? Yes, thank you. She started to stand, but he waved her back down. These are my foremen, he said, gesturing to the men behind him. James Cooper, you met him briefly last night, and that's Frank Holloway. They keep this place running when I can't be everywhere at once. James was maybe 50, with a face that looked like tanned leather and eyes that missed nothing. Frank was younger, stockier, with hands the size of dinner plates and a scar running from his left ear to his jaw. Ma'am, they both said, touching their hat brims. Gentlemen. Mara felt acutely aware of her shabby dress, her work-roughened hands, everything about her that screamed outsider. Mrs. Vance will be working in the office, Coulter continued, going through the account books, getting things organized. She's to have whatever she needs, access to files, records, anything she asks for. Understood? James and Frank exchanged a look Mara couldn't quite read. Yes, sir, James said slowly. Though I should mention, some of those accounts go back 15 years. Not all of it's exactly. I know what's in there, Coulter cut him off. That's why she's going through it, to make sense of the mess. He poured himself coffee, drained half the cup in one go. Anything else happens today I should know about? Storm's coming in tomorrow, Frank said. Big one by the look of the sky. We're moving the herd to the south pasture, closer to shelter. Should have them settled by nightfall. Good. What about the fence line on the eastern border? Fixed. Johnson's boy did solid work on the posts. They talked for another 10 minutes, a rapid back and forth of ranch business that went over Mara's head. Cattle counts and hay supplies and something about a bull that had gotten loose and terrorized the neighboring property. The language of a working operation, smooth and practiced. Then footsteps thundered down the stairs and Eli burst into the kitchen, Rowan right behind him. Both boys skidded to a stop when they saw the room full of people, suddenly shy. Morning, Eli managed. Coulter turned, his expression shifting into something Mara couldn't quite name. Not quite a smile, but close. Morning. You two sleep well? Rowan nodded. Eli said, Yes, sir. That bed's real soft. Good beds are important. Coulter crouched down, bringing himself to their level. You boys know how to ride? A little, Eli said, which was generous. They'd ridden a plow horse twice. Want to learn proper? Both boys' eyes went wide. Really? Eli breathed. Really. After breakfast, Frank here will teach you the basics. How to sit, how to hold the reins, how to tell a horse what you want without spooking it. He glanced up at Mara. If your mother agrees, of course. Every instinct screamed at her to say no. To keep them close, keep them safe, not let them near anything that could throw them or kick them or break their fragile 7-year-old bones. But the hope in their faces stopped her. When had they last looked excited about anything? When had they last been allowed to be children instead of survivors? All right, she heard herself say. But you listen to Mr. Holloway. Do exactly as he says. Understand? Yes, Mama. They said it in unison, already bouncing with barely contained energy. Frank grinned, a surprisingly warm expression on his scarred face. Don't worry, Mrs. Vance. I'll keep them safe. Raised 4 boys of my own. They all survived learning to ride. That's not as reassuring as you think it is, Mara muttered, but Frank just laughed. Breakfast was chaos in the best possible way. The kitchen filled with ranch hands coming off night watch, looking for hot food before they collapsed into bed. Sarah and Jenny moved like dervishes, serving up eggs and bacon and biscuits with butter and jam. Conversations overlapped. Jokes flew. Someone started singing a bawdy song until Sarah shut them down with a wooden spoon and a look that could have frozen water. The twins ate like they'd never seen food before, which wasn't far from the truth. Mara watched them stuff biscuits into their mouths, cheeks bulging like chipmunks, and felt her throat tighten. This was what children were supposed to look like. Fed, safe, happy. You good with numbers? James asked, settling onto the bench beside her with a plate piled high. Good enough. Previous bookkeeper left things in a state. Accounts haven't been properly reconciled in 6 months, maybe longer. Some of the suppliers are threatening to cut credit if we don't get our bills straight. That bad? Worse. He took a bite of eggs, chewed thoughtfully. Mr. Reed's a good rancher. One of the best. But he's not a detail man. He thinks in terms of herds and land and long-term planning. The day-to-day numbers make his eyes cross. That's why he needs someone who can translate it for him. I can do that. Hope so. James studied her with those sharp eyes. Can I give you some advice, Mrs. Vance? Free and unsolicited? I suspect you will, whether I want it or not. He grinned. Smart woman. Here it is. Don't try to change everything at once. This ranch has its own rhythm, its own way of doing things. Some of it might seem backwards to you, might not make sense. But there's usually a reason, even if it's not obvious. Learn the rhythm before you start suggesting a new song. Noted. And second thing, Mr. Reed trusts actions more than words. You tell him something will get done. You better make damn sure it gets done. He's got no patience for excuses or empty promises. I don't make empty promises. Then you'll do fine. James stood, clapped her on the shoulder hard enough to make her rock forward. Office is down the hall, second door on the left. Good luck, Mrs. Vance. You're going to need it. The office was worse than she'd imagined. Papers covered every surface, the massive oak desk, the filing cabinets, the chairs, even parts of the floor. Ledgers stacked in precarious towers, receipts stuffed into boxes with no apparent organization. 6 months of chaos crammed into one room and left to fester. Mara stood in the doorway and felt her stomach drop. Impressive, isn't it? She turned to find Coulter behind her, looking at the disaster with something that might have been embarrassment. That's one word for it, she said carefully. Jackson, the previous bookkeeper, he had a system. Claimed he knew where everything was, could find any document in under a minute. Coulter picked up a ledger, flipped through pages covered in barely legible scrawl. Problem is, the system died with him. Or rather, with his liver. How did you manage in the meantime? Badly. He set the ledger down, ran a hand through his hair. Look, Mrs. Vance, I'll level with you. This is going to be hell. Sorting through 6 months of backlog, trying to make sense of a dead man's organizational chaos, reconciling accounts that haven't been touched since spring. I won't blame you if you take one look and walk out. Mara moved into the room, picked up a random receipt. Feed purchase from a supplier in town dated 4 months ago. No record of payment, no filing notation, just a slip of paper lost in the avalanche. Where do you want me to start? She asked. Something shifted in Coulter's expression. Respect, maybe, or relief. Wherever makes the most sense to you. You're the expert now. I'll need supplies. Clean ledgers, ink, pens, file boxes, and I'll need to talk to people, suppliers, ranch hands, anyone who made purchases in the last 6 months. Done. Make a list, give it to Sarah. She'll get you whatever you need. He moved toward the door, paused. Mrs. Vance, thank you for not running. Where would I run to? She said, already starting to sort papers into rough piles. The prairie tried to kill me. I'll take the paperwork. His laugh was quiet but genuine, and then he was gone, leaving her alone with the chaos. She worked through the morning, barely aware of time passing. The first priority was simple triage, sorting everything into categories. Receipts, correspondence, payroll records, bills paid, bills unpaid, bills that might be paid but who could tell because Jackson's handwriting looked like a drunk spider had crawled across the page. Sarah brought lunch on a tray, sandwiches and coffee, and Mara ate without stopping, food in one hand and receipts in the other. You're going to make yourself sick, Sarah observed. I've been sick before. I've never been unemployed in winter with 2 children. I'll take sick. Stubborn. Practical. Sarah snorted. Same thing, different word. She collected the empty plate. The boys are doing well, if you're wondering. Frank's got them on the gentlest mare we own, just walking circles in the corral. They're grinning like fools. Mara looked up, surprised by the warmth in her chest. Thank you for watching them. Not just me, everyone's keeping an eye. That's how it works here. We take care of our own. Sarah paused at the door. And Mrs. Vance? You're one of us now, whether you believe it yet or not. By late afternoon, Mara had made a dent. Not a large one, but visible progress. She'd sorted the past 6 months into rough chronological order, identified the major creditors, and started a list of questions that would need answers. Her back ached from hunching over the desk, her eyes burned from squinting at terrible handwriting, and she felt more alive than she had in months. This was work. Real work. The kind that used her mind instead of just her body's ability to endure. The kind Daniel had always said she was too smart for, back when they'd had the luxury of dreams about what life might hold. She was deep into a particularly confusing series of hay purchases when the door opened and Coulter walked in, followed by a man she didn't recognize. Older, 60s maybe, with silver hair and a suit that had no business being on a cattle ranch. Mrs. Vance, Coulter said, this is Robert Morrison. He's the lawyer who handles most of my business affairs. Robert, this is Mara Vance, our new bookkeeper. Morrison's handshake was firm but brief. His eyes swept the room, taking in the organized chaos, and something calculating passed across his face. Mr. Reed mentioned he'd found someone to tackle the accounts. You have experience with ranch finances? I have experience with numbers and organization, Mara said carefully. The specific industry doesn't matter. Chaos is chaos. Refreshingly honest. Morrison pulled out a leather folder, extracted several documents. I'm here because we have a situation developing, one that requires accurate financial records. Coulter's jaw tightened. Robert, she needs to know. If she's going to be managing the books, she needs to understand the stakes. Silence stretched between them. Heavy with tension, Mara didn't understand. Finally, Coulter nodded, short and sharp. Morrison spread the documents on the least cluttered corner of the desk. Are you familiar with the name Beaumont, Mrs. Vance? No? Celeste Beaumont. She runs a cattle operation east of here, inherited from her father 5 years ago. She's also Mr. Reed's former fiancée. The words landed like stones in still water, ripples spreading outward. Mara kept her face neutral. I see. When they were engaged, Morrison continued, his voice taking on the tone of a man presenting evidence, certain financial arrangements were made. Business partnerships, shared investments, contracts that linked their operations. The engagement ended 3 years ago, but some of those entanglements remain. Specifically, Coulter cut in, voice flat, there's a supply contract that was signed jointly. Both ranches agreed to purchase cattle feed from a specific supplier at a negotiated rate. The contract runs for 5 years. We're in year 4. And Miss Beaumont is claiming breach of contract, Morrison finished. She says Reed Ranch hasn't honored the minimum purchase requirements for the past 6 months. She's threatening legal action and demanding penalty payments that would total nearly $30,000. Mara's breath caught. $30,000. That was more money than she'd see in 3 lifetimes. Have we breached? That's what we need to know, Coulter said. Jackson handled those orders. He said everything was fine, that we were meeting the requirements. But with his records in this state, he gestured at the room. I can't prove it either way. When does she need an answer? 2 weeks, Morrison said. She's given us 2 weeks to provide documentation showing we've met the contract terms, or she files suit. Mara looked at the mountains of paper surrounding her. 6 months of missing records, somewhere in this chaos. 2 weeks to find proof that might not exist. What happens if she wins? Best case, we pay the $30,000 and it hurts but doesn't kill us, Coulter said. Worst case, the court rules that the breach is severe enough to void other agreements we have with suppliers. That starts a cascade. Creditors get nervous. Banks start calling loans. Everything I've built here comes apart. Why would she do this, Mara asked. If you were engaged, if there was feeling there once, because Celeste Beaumont doesn't lose, Morrison said simply. And when Mr. Reed ended their engagement, she lost. This is revenge dressed up as business. Coulter moved to the window, looked out at the ranch he'd built from nothing. I ended it because she wanted to merge the operations, make it all one big empire with her in charge. I didn't build this place to hand it over to someone else's ambition. She didn't take it well. That was an understatement, Mara suspected. She studied the documents Morrison had brought, recognizing the contract language even if the specific terms were foreign. I'll need the original contract, any correspondence related to it, every receipt for feed purchases in the past year, and I'll need to know what the minimum requirements actually are, specific amounts, specific time frames. You can find this? Morrison asked, skepticism clear in his voice. I can try. That's all I can promise. Coulter turned from his window. That's more than I had an hour ago. After they left, Mara sat at the desk and stared at the impossible task ahead of her. 2 weeks. Mountains of chaos. And the future of this ranch, the home that had saved her son's lives, hanging in the balance. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. The days blurred together. Mara fell into a rhythm that started before dawn and ended long after dark. She'd check on the boys, who were thriving under Frank's patient instruction, learning to ride and care for horses and do all the things ranch children did, then disappear into the office. Sarah brought meals. Coffee appeared at regular intervals, supplied by Jenny or one of the ranch hands who'd started viewing the office as some kind of battlefield where Mara fought alone. The feed purchase receipts were scattered through 4 months of records, filed under 3 different categories depending on Jackson's mood when he'd logged them. She found them one by one, cross-referenced them against the contract requirements, built spreadsheets in her neatest handwriting showing dates and amounts and cumulative totals. 3 days in, she knew they were short. Not by much, but short. 5 days in, she found an amendment to the original contract, tucked inside a ledger and forgotten. The amendment adjusted the minimum requirements downward by 15% for the second half of the contract period. 7 days in, she had proof. They'd met the requirements. Barely, by a margin so thin you could see through it, but they'd met them. She found Coulter in the barn, working on a saddle that had seen better days. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, needle and thread repairing a tear in the leather. He looked up when she approached, and she saw the tension in his shoulders, the worry he'd been carrying for a week. "We're good," she said simply. His hand stilled. "You're sure?" "I have the receipts. Every purchase, cross-referenced with the contract requirements, is modified by the amendment from month 18. We met minimum purchases in every period. It's close, but it's documented." Coulter set down the saddle, stood slowly. "The amendment. I'd forgotten about that." Jackson filed it in a random ledger instead of with the contract. Easy to miss. "But you didn't miss it. I didn't have the luxury of missing it." She handed him the folder she'd compiled, 3 inches thick with documentation. "This is everything Morrison will need. Purchase orders, receipts, bank records showing payment, the amended contract, and a summary sheet explaining how it all fits together." He took the folder, flipped through it, and something that might have been relief washed across his face. "How bad was it, really? We were within 2% of failing the requirements in 2 different months. If Jackson hadn't made those purchases when he did, even drunk, he must have been tracking it somehow. We would have breached." Cutting it close. "Surviving isn't pretty, it just has to work." She paused, then added, "Mr. Reed, those contracts with Miss Beaumont, there are 3 others still active. They all have similar minimum requirements, and they all expire within 18 months of each other. That's not coincidence." His jaw tightened. "No, it's not. She structured them to give her maximum leverage at a specific point in time. This feed contract was just the opening move. If she'd won this, she would have used it to pressure the others, force renegotiation, maybe force a merger." "You got all that from the contracts?" "I got it from being a woman who understands how men think we're too stupid to read the fine print." Mara met his eyes. "She's smart, dangerous, and she's not done. Winning this doesn't end it. It just means she'll come at you another way." "I know." He tucked the folder under his arm. "Mrs. Vance, what you've done here, finding this, putting it together, you saved this ranch. You know that, right?" "I did my job. That's what you're paying me for." "No, you went beyond, way beyond." He paused, seemed to be working up to something. "The boys, they're happy here?" The change in subject caught her off guard. "Yes, they love it. And you? Are you happy here?" "I'm grateful to be here. Happiness is," she searched for words, "not something I think about much anymore." "Maybe you should. Think about it, I mean." He shifted, uncomfortable in a way she hadn't seen from him before. "What I'm trying to say is, you're good at this. The books, the organization, understanding the business. I'd like you to stay. Not just until the accounts are sorted, but permanently. Salary, proper contract, everything official." Mara's heart kicked against her ribs. "Mr. Reed." "Coulter. Just Coulter. We're past formality at this point. Coulter." She tried the name. Found it felt strange on her tongue, too familiar, too intimate. "I appreciate the offer, more than you know, but people are going to talk. A widow living in a bachelor's house, working closely with him, you know what they'll say." "Let them say it. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who will be called—" She stopped, couldn't quite make herself finish the thought. "I know what they'll call you. I also know it's garbage." His voice went hard. "You earned your place here. Your sons have found something like happiness. And frankly, I need you. The ranch needs you. So yes, people will talk. They always do. But I'm asking you to stay anyway." She should say no. Should protect her reputation, protect the boys from gossip, protect herself from whatever this was growing between them, this respect that felt dangerously close to something else. But the truth was, she had nowhere else to go. No other options. And maybe, just maybe, she was tired of running. "All right," she said. "I'll stay." His smile was small but genuine, and it transformed his face completely. "Good. That's good." Morrison took the folder to Celeste Beaumont's lawyers 3 days later. The response came back within 24 hours. The breach claim was withdrawn. No admission of error, no apology, just a terse letter stating that upon review of new evidence, the matter was considered resolved. The ranch celebrated that night. Someone brought out fiddles. Sarah and Jenny cooked enough food to feed half the county. Ranch hands who'd been quietly worried about their jobs got drunk and sentimental. The twins danced with anyone who'd spin them, laughing so hard they could barely breathe. Mara stood on the porch, watching it all, feeling like she was observing her life from outside her own body. A month ago, she'd been dying on the prairie. Now she was here, part of this, employed and safe, and watching her children be children again. "You did this," Sarah said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of cider. "You saved us." "I sorted some papers." "You saved us," Sarah repeated firmly. "Own it, girl. You earned it." Inside, Coulter stood talking to James and Frank, gesturing with his hands as he explained something. He caught Mara's eye through the window and raised his glass in a small salute. She raised hers back, and something passed between them that made her chest feel tight. Sarah saw it. "Be careful," she said quietly. "Of what?" "Of forgetting that gratitude and affection are easy to confuse, especially when you're both lonely." Sarah's voice held no judgment, just concern. "He's a good man. You're a good woman. But the world doesn't care about good. It cares about appearances and social rules and who married above their station. Just be careful, for both your sakes. Nothing's happening between us. Not yet. But it could. I've got eyes." Sarah squeezed her arm gently. "Just remember, when you're poor and he's rich, when you've got no family and he's got the weight of this whole operation on his shoulders, love isn't simple. It's complicated by 100 things neither of you can control. And the complications hurt worst when you forget they exist." She walked away, leaving Mara alone with her cider and her thoughts, and the uncomfortable truth that Sarah was right. Winter deepened. The ranch settled into its cold weather rhythms. Cattle stayed close to shelter. Ranch hands worked in rotating shifts, making sure nothing froze that shouldn't freeze. The twins learned to bundle up properly, developed rosy cheeks from hours spent outside, grew stronger and more confident with each passing day. Mara worked through the backlog, transformed the chaos into order. She implemented new filing systems, reconciled 3 years of questionable bookkeeping, and created reports that let Coulter see his entire operation at a glance. She learned the ranch's rhythms, learned which suppliers could be trusted and which needed watching, learned the delicate balance between spending money to make money and spending money to survive. And she learned Coulter, not all at once, in pieces. The way he was gentle with the horses, but hard on men who didn't pull their weight. How he remembered every ranch hand's family situation, knew whose wife was pregnant and whose father was sick. The fact that he read philosophy books late at night, German and French texts he'd somehow acquired and taught himself to translate. That he'd built this empire not just through toughness, but through fairness, paying fair wages and expecting fair work in return. He brought her coffee in the mornings, sat across the desk going over reports. They talked about numbers and cattle and weather patterns, safe topics, business topics. But sometimes their hands would brush passing papers, or he'd laugh at something she said, and the air between them would shift into something that felt dangerous. The boys loved him. That was the hardest part. Watching Eli and Rowan trail after Coulter like puppies, soaking up his quiet attention, learning to be men from a man who actually knew how. Daniel had been a good father, loving and present, but he'd been a dreamer. Coulter was practical, teaching them skills they'd actually use, how to fix things, how to read land and weather, how to make hard choices. "You're good with them," Mara said one evening, watching Coulter show Rowan how to tie a proper knot. "I like kids. Always figured I'd have some of my own eventually." He pulled the rope tight, demonstrating the technique again. "That didn't work out." "Miss Beaumont didn't want children?" "She wanted heirs. There's a difference." He handed the rope to Rowan. "Your turn. Remember, over, under, through." Rowan concentrated fiercely, his small fingers working the rope. When he got it right, Coulter's face lit up with pride. "That's it. Perfect. Now you can teach Eli." After the boys ran off to practice together, Coulter stood, brushing dust off his knees. What Celeste wanted was a dynasty, combined ranches, political influence, enough money and land to matter in Denver society. Kids were just part of that plan. I couldn't... He paused, searching for words. "I couldn't sign up for a life where my children would be assets on a balance sheet instead of people. So you ended it." "So I ended it." She didn't forgive me. Probably never will. He looked at Mara, really looked at her. What about you? You planning to marry again? The question caught her completely off guard. What? You're young. Your husband's been gone, what, 6 months? Eventually someone's going to come courting. You've thought about it, right? No, I haven't. The lie tasted bitter. I've been too busy trying to survive. But if you did think about it, what would you want? Another dreamer like your husband? Or something different? Why are you asking me this? Because I'm trying to figure out if I have a chance. The words hung between them, heavy and impossible. Mara's heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. Coulter, I know. I know all the reasons it's a bad idea. You work for me. You're dependent on me. People will talk. Your reputation, the boys, the ranch. I know. He moved closer, and she could smell leather and wool and something uniquely him. But I'm asking anyway, do I have a chance? She should say no, should protect herself, protect him, protect the fragile stability they'd built. But she was so tired of lying, even to herself. Yes, she whispered, you have a chance. His hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers gentle. Then I'm going to court you properly, the way you deserve. Not hidden, not ashamed. Everyone will know my intentions, understood? That's insane. The gossip alone will... I don't care about gossip. Well, I do. And I care about what it'll do to the boys, to the ranch, to everything we've built here. She stepped back, putting distance between them. We can't do this. We can, if we're brave enough. His eyes held hers. You were brave enough to keep your sons alive on the prairie, brave enough to walk into that disaster of an office and sort it out. Are you brave enough to let yourself be happy? That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. But it's real. What's between us? You feel it too. She did. That was the terrifying part. Somewhere between the coffee and the late-night reports and watching him teach her sons to tie knots, she'd started falling. Not the wild rush of young love, but something steadier, deeper. The kind of feeling that grew between people who'd seen each other's worst and stayed anyway. I need time, she said finally, to think, to figure out if this is real or if we're both just lonely. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. He smiled, sad and hopeful at once. But Mara? I'm done pretending I don't care about you. Whatever you decide, that's not changing. He left her there on the porch, alone with the night and her racing thoughts, and the impossible question of what happened when you got a second chance at happiness, and couldn't figure out if you deserved it. The answer came faster than she expected, and from the last direction she wanted. A rider arrived 3 days later, carrying a message for Coulter. Mara watched from the office window as he read it, saw his face go hard and closed. When he came inside, he handed her the letter without a word. It was an invitation to a winter social in town, hosted by Celeste Beaumont, specifically requesting the presence of Mr. Coulter Reed and his household staff, including, by name, Mrs. Mara Vance. She knows, Mara said quietly. She knows, or suspects. Either way, she's making her move. Coulter's jaw was tight. You don't have to go. Yes, I do. If I hide, it looks like we're ashamed, like there's something to hide. Is there? She met his eyes. Not yet. But she's betting there will be, and she's forcing us to either confirm it or deny it in front of the whole town. Smart, Coulter admitted grudgingly. Vicious, but smart. What do? We go. We act normal. We give her nothing to work with. He crumpled the invitation in his fist, and we hope that's enough. But they both knew it wouldn't be. Celeste Beaumont had fired her opening shot. The real battle was just beginning, and this time, numbers and receipts wouldn't save them. The dress hung in Mara's room like an accusation. Dark blue silk, borrowed from Sarah's niece, who'd worn it exactly once to a wedding before deciding ranch life had no use for fancy clothing. It fit well enough, though the waist needed taking in and the hem dragged slightly. Mara stared at it and felt sick. You look like you're preparing for battle, Sarah said from the doorway. Aren't I? Maybe. But you go in there acting like a victim, and Celeste wins before the first waltz. Sarah moved into the room, started pinning Mara's hair with practiced efficiency. Head up, shoulders back. You belong there as much as anyone. I'm a penniless widow, wearing a borrowed dress to a social hosted by the woman whose engagement I may have destroyed. I don't belong anywhere near there. You didn't destroy anything. Coulter ended that engagement 2 years before he met you. Sarah's hands worked quickly, transforming Mara's simple braid into something elegant. But facts don't matter to people who've already decided the story. So you write a better one. How? By being exactly what you are. Smart, capable. A woman who saved Reed Ranch when no one else could. Let them see that. Let them wonder why a man like Coulter would choose you, and then show them. She stepped back, surveyed her work. There. You'll do. Mara barely recognized herself in the small mirror. The woman looking back had her face, but carried it differently. Head high, eyes clear. Someone who belonged in silk dresses and society gatherings, even if she'd never been to one in her life. I don't know how to do this, she admitted quietly. The dancing, the small talk, all of it. Daniel and I, we were simple people. Then stay simple. It's the honest ones who scare people like Celeste most. Sarah squeezed her shoulder. And remember, she invited you because she thinks you're weak. Prove her wrong. The ride to town took an hour, the wagon rattling over frozen roads under a sky threatening snow. Coulter sat beside Mara, Frank drove, and the twins bounced in the back despite Sarah's warnings to keep their good clothes clean. They'd been excited for days about the social, about seeing town decorated for winter, about the promised sweets and music. Mara couldn't bring herself to dampen their joy with her own dread. You all right? Coulter asked quietly. No, but I'll manage. We can turn back, say you're ill, and let her win without a fight? Mara shook her head. I've faced worse than gossip and manipulation. I'll survive. His hand found hers under the folds of her skirt, squeezed once. You're not alone in this. That's what worries me. If it was just me, I wouldn't care what they said, but the boys are with Sarah and Jenny tonight. They'll stay at the ranch's townhouse, safe and warm and stuffed with cookies. This isn't about them. Everything is about them. Every choice I make. I know. His thumb traced small circles on her palm, intimate and steadying. But sometimes you have to choose yourself, too. You're allowed to want things, Mara. You're allowed to be happy. Am I? Because right now it feels like wanting anything is just giving her ammunition to destroy us with. He didn't have an answer for that. Neither did she. Town glittered with lamplight and ice, every building decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons. The community hall sat at the center, 3 stories of brick and timber that served as everything from courthouse to dance hall depending on the day. Tonight it blazed with light, music spilling out into the frozen street. Wagons and horses crowded the hitching posts. People in their finest clothes climbed the steps, laughing and calling greetings to each other. Mara's stomach clenched. These were Coulter's people, his community, the ranchers and merchants and families who'd watched him build his empire, who respected him, who thought they knew him. What would they see when she walked in on his arm? What stories would they tell themselves about the widow who'd appeared out of nowhere and caught his attention? Breathe, Coulter said. Just breathe. They climbed down from the wagon. Frank took the twins toward the townhouse where Sarah waited. Coulter offered his arm and Mara took it, feeling the solid strength of him, trying to borrow his certainty. The moment they entered, conversation stuttered. Not silent, that would have been too obvious, but noticeably quieter. Heads turned, eyes tracked them across the room. Mara felt every gaze like a physical touch, cataloging and judging. Mr. Reed. A portly man in an expensive suit pushed through the crowd, hand extended. Good to see you. We were beginning to think you wouldn't come. Mayor Hanson, Coulter shook his hand. Wouldn't miss it. May I introduce Mrs. Mara Vance? She's managing the ranch accounts. Mrs. Vance? Hanson's handshake was perfunctory, his eyes already calculating. I heard Reed Ranch had brought on new staff. Quite a change from Jackson's methods, I imagine. Different methods, Mara said carefully. But the same goal, keeping accurate records. Of course. Of course. Hanson's smile didn't reach his eyes. And you're from St. Louis originally, though I've been traveling for some time. With your husband? The question was a knife wrapped in politeness. I'm widowed, Mayor Hanson. My husband passed 6 months ago. My condolences. He didn't sound sorry. And you have children, I'm told? 2 sons, 7 years old. How fortunate that Mr. Reed was able to provide employment. These are difficult times for women alone. The words were sympathetic, but the tone suggested something else entirely. Poor widow, dependent on male charity, probably willing to do anything to keep her position. Mara felt Coulter tense beside her, but she spoke before he could. Mr. Reed needed a bookkeeper. I needed work. It's been mutually beneficial. I'm sure it has. Hanson's eyes flicked between them, seeing too much. Well, enjoy the evening. Miss Beaumont has put together quite the affair. He melted back into the crowd, and Mara released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. That was a warning shot, Coulter muttered. I know. Where is she? Across the room. Don't look. Not yet. But Mara looked anyway. Celeste Beaumont stood near the refreshment table, surrounded by admirers like a queen holding court. She wore emerald green silk that must have cost more than Mara earned in a year, her blonde hair arranged in elaborate curls, jewels at her throat and wrists. Beautiful in the way money and breeding created beauty, polished, perfect, untouchable. As if sensing Mara's gaze, Celeste turned. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Celeste's smile could have cut glass. She said something to her companions, then moved through the crowd with practiced grace. People parted for her instinctively, stepping aside, deferring. She commanded space the way Coulter commanded respect, through sheer force of will and the certainty that the world would bend to accommodate her. Coulter. Her voice was honey over steel. I'm so glad you came. And you brought your bookkeeper. How thoughtful. Celeste. Coulter's voice was neutral, giving nothing. Thank you for the invitation. You've put together a lovely evening. I do try. Her eyes fixed on Mara, cataloging every detail. The borrowed dress, the simple hairstyle, the work-roughened hands Mara tried not to hide. Mrs. Vance, I've heard so much about you, the widow who appeared out of nowhere and managed to sort out poor Jackson's mess. Quite impressive. I did what needed doing. How modest. Celeste's smile sharpened. Though I must admit I was surprised when Coulter hired someone so inexperienced. No formal training, no references, no background in ranch finances, just a widow with children to feed and nowhere else to go. It seemed unlike him to take such a risk. The insult was clear beneath the pleasant words. Charity case. Desperate. Unqualified. Sometimes the best people come from unexpected places, Mara said evenly. Experience isn't everything. No? I've always found that proper credentials matter. In business, in society, in life. One can't simply decide they belong somewhere without earning the right. Her gaze shifted to Coulter. Though I suppose some people are more flexible about such things than others. Celeste, Coulter started, but she talked over him. I do hope you'll save me a dance later, Coulter. For old time's sake, we have so much to catch up on. She turned that sharp smile back to Mara. And Mrs. Vance, you simply must try the punch. I had it made special, something sweet for those not accustomed to refined tastes. She glided away, leaving destruction in her wake as casually as breathing. I'm going to kill her, Coulter said under his breath. No, that's what she wants, for you to lose control, make a scene, prove that I'm a bad influence. Mara's hands shook, but she kept her voice steady. She's positioning, showing everyone that she belongs here and I don't. That she's the right kind of woman for someone like you. The right kind of woman would be you. Not to them. She nodded at the room full of people pretending not to watch. To them, I'm an interloper. Someone taking advantage of your kindness, or worse. Let them think what they want. Easy to say when your reputation isn't the one being shredded. He started to respond, but someone called his name, another rancher wanting to discuss cattle prices, and he was pulled away. Mara stood alone, surrounded by people who looked at her like she was a problem to be solved. A younger woman approached, pretty in a calculated way. You're the bookkeeper, she said. Not a question. I am. I'm Margaret Winters. My father supplies feed to several ranches, including Reed's. Her smile was friendly, but her eyes were assessing. How are you finding the work? Challenging, but manageable. And living at the ranch? That must be convenient. There it was. The real question underneath. Are you sleeping with him? Mr. Reed runs a professional household, Mara said carefully. I have my own quarters. My sons and I are well cared for. Of course. I didn't mean to imply. But she had. They both knew it. It's just unusual, isn't it? A single woman living in a bachelor's home. People talk. People always talk. They do. And right now they're wondering why Coulter Reed, one of the most eligible men in the territory, would hire a woman with no experience and 2 children to feed. What could she possibly offer that a qualified male bookkeeper couldn't? Mara felt her face heat. I offer competence and dedication to the work. I'm sure you do. Margaret's smile turned pitying. I'm just saying, be careful. Men like Coulter Reed don't marry down. They can't afford to. When the novelty wears off, you'll find yourself back on the street with nowhere to go. Best to remember your place before you start thinking you deserve more. She walked away, leaving Mara standing there with rage and shame warring in her chest. Remember your place. As if she'd forgotten. As if every moment in this room wasn't a reminder that she didn't belong here, would never belong here, no matter how well she managed the accounts or how much Coulter cared for her. The evening dragged on. Mara endured more conversations like the one with Margaret. Polite on the surface, vicious underneath. Women who smiled while suggesting she was a gold digger. Men who looked at her like she was a commodity Coulter had purchased. Dancing started and she retreated to the edges of the room, watching Coulter be pulled from partner to partner, fulfilling social obligations with grace, even though she could see the tension in his shoulders. Then Celeste claimed him for a waltz. They moved across the floor like they'd been made to dance together, her hand in his, her emerald dress swirling, her head tilted just right to make him lean in to hear her words. The perfect couple, the kind of match everyone expected, everyone wanted, money and power combining to create something even stronger. Mara watched and felt something crack inside her chest. This was foolish, all of it. She'd let herself believe in fairy tales when she should have known better. Coulter Reed could have anyone, should have someone like Celeste, someone who knew how to navigate this world, who could help him build instead of dragging him down. What did Mara have to offer? Competence with numbers? A ready-made family? Those weren't reasons to choose someone. Those were reasons to be kind to an employee. She slipped out onto the back porch, needing air, needing distance from the music and laughter and judgment. Snow had started falling again, soft and steady, muffling sound. She wrapped her arms around herself and tried not to cry. Running away? Mara spun. Celeste stood in the doorway, backlit by warm light, looking like something from a painting. I needed air, I'm sure. Celeste stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind her. The temperature dropped immediately. Let's talk honestly, shall we? Woman to woman. I don't think we have anything to say to each other. No, I think we have plenty. Celeste moved closer, her perfume expensive and cloying. You're sleeping with him. Don't bother denying it. I'm not. Not yet. But you want to. He wants to. It's written all over both of you. She studied Mara like a scientist examining a specimen. I'll admit, I didn't understand it at first. You're not beautiful, not accomplished, not from any family worth mentioning, but then I realized you're the damsel in distress, the widow with children he gets to rescue. It appeals to his sense of honor, makes him feel like a hero. That's not... But here's what you need to understand. Celeste's voice went cold. Novelty wears off. Honor gets boring. Eventually he'll remember that he needs a partner who can actually help him, not a charity case who requires constant protection. And when that happens, where will you be? That's between Coulter and me. No. It's between Coulter and everyone who depends on him. 40 families, businesses in 3 towns, suppliers, creditors, partners. They all need him focused and strong, not distracted by some woman who showed up at exactly the right time with exactly the right sob story to catch his attention. Mara's hands clenched into fists. You think I planned this? I was dying on the prairie. My children were freezing. Coulter stopped because he's a decent man, not because I manipulated him. Maybe. Or maybe you saw an opportunity and took it. Can't blame you, really. If I were desperate enough, I might do the same. Celeste's smile was pure poison. But understand this. I'm giving you one chance to leave with your dignity intact. Take your children and go. I'll even help. Give you enough money to start over somewhere else. Set you up with a real job, proper references. You walk away clean. And if I don't, then I destroy you. Said simply, like commenting on the weather. Not just your reputation, though that's easy enough. I'll raise questions about your husband's death, suggest maybe it wasn't illness. Maybe you had reasons to want him gone. Maybe those children aren't safe with you. The world tilted. You wouldn't. They're 7 years old. I would do whatever it takes to protect what's mine. And Coulter Reed is mine, whether he's figured that out yet or not. Celeste moved to the door, paused with her hand on the handle. You have until the end of January. After that, I start making inquiries. And trust me, Mrs. Vance, I'm very good at finding dirt when I need to, even if I have to create it myself. She disappeared inside, leaving Mara alone with the snow and the threat hanging in the frozen air. Mara made it through the rest of the evening on autopilot, smiled when required, made conversation she wouldn't remember 5 minutes later. Avoided Coulter's concerned looks because if he asked what was wrong, she'd fall apart completely. When they finally loaded into the wagon for the ride home, she felt hollowed out and exhausted. The twins chattered about cookies and decorations until sleep claimed them somewhere outside town. Frank drove in silence. Coulter sat beside Mara, his thigh pressed against hers, warm and solid and wrong because she couldn't have this, couldn't keep this, couldn't risk what Celeste would do if she tried. "What did she say to you?" Coulter asked quietly. "Nothing that matters." Mara, please, not now. I'm tired." He let it drop, but his jaw was tight and his hands clenched on his knees. He knew something had happened. He just didn't know what. Back at the ranch, Mara helped carry sleeping boys to their room, tucked them in, kissed their foreheads. They looked so peaceful, so safe. Everything she'd fought for, everything she'd risked to give them. Could she really gamble their safety on feelings that might not last? On Coulter's honor standing against Celeste's ruthlessness? She found him in the office, standing at the window, staring out at nothing. "Tell me," he said without turning around. So she did. All of it. Celeste's offer, her threats, the ultimatum hanging over their heads like a blade. When she finished, Coulter was silent for a long moment. Then he said, voice deadly calm, "She threatened your children. She threatened everything. I'll kill her." He turned and Mara saw rage on his face like nothing she'd witnessed before. "I will actually kill her." "You can't. That's what she wants, for you to lose control, do something that destroys you. Then she wins everything." "So what? I let her blackmail you into leaving? Threaten your sons? There has to be." He stopped, ran both hands through his hair. "There has to be a way to fight this. Not without risking Eli and Rowan. She'll twist anything, make me look unfit, maybe even try to take them from me." Mara's voice cracked. "I can't risk that. They're all I have. You have me. For how long? Until she makes good on her threats? Until the scandal gets too loud and you have to choose between me and the ranch?" She moved to the desk, put it between them like a barrier. "Sarah warned me. This was always going to end badly. I was just too selfish to listen. This isn't selfishness. It's..." He struggled for words. "You deserve happiness. A life that's more than just surviving. Maybe, but not at the cost of my children's safety." "So that's it? You're going to let her win?" "I'm going to protect my sons. That's what mothers do." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "I'll stay until you find another bookkeeper. Keep everything running until the transition is smooth. But then we leave. Find somewhere else. Somewhere she can't reach us. Running. For the rest of your life. If that's what it takes." Coulter moved around the desk so fast she didn't have time to retreat. His hands framed her face, gentle, despite the anger still burning in his eyes. "I won't let her do this. I won't let her take you from me. You might not have a choice. There's always a choice, and I choose you. I choose the boys. I choose the life we could build together if you'd let yourself believe it's possible." Believing doesn't make it real, Coulter. Hope doesn't stop her from destroying everything. "No, but fighting does." He kissed her forehead, soft and devastating. "Give me time. Let me figure out how to protect you. Don't make any decisions yet." "What's there to figure out? She has money, influence, legal resources. We have each other, the truth. People on this ranch who've seen what you're really like." His hands slid down to her shoulders. "And we have the fact that Celeste has never faced anyone who refused to back down. She's used to people folding. Let's show her what happens when they don't." Mara wanted to believe him, wanted to think love and determination could win against wealth and ruthlessness. But she'd learned hard lessons about what the world did to people who challenged power. It crushed them, every time. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Good. So am I. But we'll be scared together." He pulled her close, and she let herself lean against him, let herself pretend for just a moment that this could work. 1 month. Give me 1 month to find a way through this. If I can't, if there's no solution, then we'll figure out plan B. But don't give up yet. 1 month, she agreed, even though she knew it wouldn't be enough. The attack started 3 days later. First came the whispers. Mara heard them in town when she went to pick up supplies, conversations that stopped when she approached, women who smiled coldly and turned away. The details didn't matter. The message was clear. She didn't belong here, and everyone knew it. Then the creditors started pulling back. Suppliers who'd worked with Reed Ranch for years suddenly wanted payment up front, questioning the ranch's credit. Morrison spent 2 days making rounds, trying to shore up relationships, but the damage was subtle and pervasive. Celeste's influence, spreading like poison through the business community. She's choking our cash flow, Mara told Coulter, showing him the latest correspondence. Nothing illegal, just enough pressure to make operations difficult. Can we manage? For now. But if this continues, we'll have to start liquidating assets, selling cattle at bad prices. That starts a spiral. Coulter stared at the papers, jaw working. This is about more than getting you to leave. She's trying to force my hand completely, make me weak enough that I have to come back to her for help. Will it work? Not a chance in hell, but it's going to hurt before we're through. The hurt came faster than either of them expected. A week after the social, Morrison arrived at the ranch looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. He carried a leather folder thick with documents, and the kind of expression lawyers got when they had to deliver bad news to clients they actually liked. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "A big one." They gathered in Coulter's study. Coulter, Mara, Morrison, and James. The lawyer spread papers across the desk with the careful precision of someone handling explosives. "Remember when you and Celeste were engaged?" Morrison said. "There was a contract drawn up. Standard premarital agreement outlining what would happen if you married, how assets would be divided, all the usual provisions." "I remember, we never married, so it's void." "Not exactly." Morrison pulled out a specific document, pointed to a clause buried in the middle. "There's a provision here. If either party ends the engagement, they forfeit a penalty payment to the other party. Compensation for damages to reputation, lost opportunities, that sort of thing." Coulter leaned forward. "How much?" $50,000. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Mara's vision actually blurred. 50,000. That was everything. More than everything. The entire value of the ranch, probably. "That's insane," Coulter said. "No one agreed to that." "You did. Right here." Morrison pointed to a signature at the bottom. "Your signature, properly witnessed, dated 3 months before the engagement ended." "I never signed that." "The signature expert I hired says you did. Or at least, they can't prove you didn't. It's close enough to your actual signature to hold up in court." Silence. Then Coulter said, very quietly, "She forged it." "Probably. But proving that is nearly impossible. The document is 3 years old. The witnesses are people she knows. And the handwriting is close enough that a judge will likely accept it as valid unless we can produce the original draft showing the forgery." "Which we don't have," Coulter said flatly. "Which we don't have." Morrison pulled out another document. "And there's more. She's filed suit claiming you breached the engagement contract. She's demanding immediate payment of the penalty plus interest. Total amount owed, $62,000, due in 30 days. Mara felt like she was drowning. "Can we fight it?" "We can try. But the document looks legitimate. The timeline supports her story, and she's got 3 witnesses willing to testify that you agreed to the terms. Our counterargument is that it's a forgery, but we can't prove that. It's her word and witnesses against yours." "So she wins," Coulter said. "Unless I can pay $62,000 in 30 days. Which you can't, not without liquidating the ranch. And if I don't pay?" Morrison's face was grim. "She can force a sale. Take the ranch to satisfy the debt. You'd be left with whatever's over after the $62,000 plus court costs. Maybe $10,000 if you're lucky." The room went silent. Mara watched Coulter process the information, saw the moment he understood the trap completely. Celeste hadn't just threatened them. She'd built a legal cage that would destroy everything he'd built, take the ranch that was his legacy, leave him with nothing unless— "She'll withdraw the suit if I marry her," Coulter said. It wasn't a question. Morrison nodded slowly. "That's what I'd expect. The suit goes away, the debt is forgiven, and she gets what she wanted all along. You, the ranch. Everything under her control. That's blackmail. It's legal blackmail, the worst kind." Coulter stood abruptly, walked to the window. His hands gripped the frame hard enough that Mara could see his knuckles go white. Outside, ranch hands worked with the cattle. Life continuing, everyone unaware that the ground beneath them was about to open up. "How long do we have?" he asked. "To respond to the suit? 30 days. To find a legal strategy that has any chance? Maybe a week before we need to file preliminary motions." Morrison started gathering the papers. "I'll keep looking for options. Maybe we can find the original draft, prove forgery. Maybe we can dig up something on her witnesses. But Coulter, I have to be honest with you. This is bad. The worst I've seen. After Morrison left, Mara sat with the numbers. She ran them every way possible, looking for some mathematical miracle that would make the situation workable. But math didn't lie. They couldn't raise $62,000 in 30 days. The ranch was worth maybe $70,000 in assets, but liquidating that fast meant selling at desperate prices. They'd lose money on every transaction. Even if they sold everything, they'd barely cover the debt. Coulter had built this empire from nothing over 15 years. Celeste was going to tear it down in 1 month. There has to be a way, Mara said, more to herself than to Coulter. There is. I marry her. No. It's the only option that saves the ranch. That protects everyone who works here. 40 families, Mara. If I lose this place, they lose their homes, their income, everything. So you sacrifice yourself? Marry a woman who's blackmailing you, who threatened my children, who's doing all of this out of revenge. Mara stood, fury overriding fear. That's not honor, Coulter. That's surrender. It's responsibility. This ranch is bigger than me, bigger than us. And what about the boys? What about... She couldn't say it, couldn't voice the feelings that had grown between them, the hope she'd let herself nurture despite knowing better. I know. His voice cracked. I know what we're losing, but I don't see another choice. Then look harder. She moved to him, grabbed his arm, forced him to meet her eyes. You told me not to give up. You said we'd fight together. Was that a lie? No, but I was wrong about our chances. You're not married yet. The suit hasn't been decided. We have 30 days. That's enough time to find something, anything that gives us leverage. Like what? We have no money, no legal grounds, no... We have the truth. And we have people who've seen what she really is. An idea sparked, desperate and probably foolish, but better than surrender. Morrison said we need the original draft to prove forgery. What if we find it? She must have kept it somewhere. You want to break into Celeste Beaumont's house and search for a document that might not exist? I want to fight instead of fold. She held his gaze. 1 week. Give me 1 week to find something. If I can't, then you do what you have to do. But don't give up yet. Coulter studied her face, something shifting in his expression. You're serious? Completely. This is insane. Probably. But I'm not watching you marry that woman without trying everything first. She took a breath. I can't give you money or influence or legal resources, but I can give you this. Someone who refuses to let you face this alone. Someone who'll fight dirty if that's what it takes. Is that enough? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then he pulled her close, kissed her hard and desperate and fierce. When he broke away, his forehead rested against hers. It's more than enough. It's everything. Then let's get to work. The plan formed over the next 3 days. James knew a woman who'd worked in Celeste's household 2 years ago, left after some dispute about wages. She might talk. Frank had connections in town, people who owed him favors, who might be willing to share information. Morrison agreed to file motions that would delay the suit as long as possible, buy them time. And Mara? Mara went through every financial record they had on Celeste's operation, looking for patterns, inconsistencies, anything that might give them an opening. She worked 18-hour days, barely sleeping, driven by fury and fear in equal measure. On the 4th night, she found something. It was small, easy to miss. A series of payments from Celeste's ranch to a lawyer in Denver dated over the past 2 years. Regular, monthly. Far more than someone would pay for routine legal work. And the amounts had increased dramatically in the months after Coulter ended their engagement. What's this? She asked Morrison, showing him the records she'd copied from public filings. He studied them, frown deepening. Those are retainer payments. She's keeping someone on permanent contract. For what? Could be anything. Estate planning, business law, contract work. He looked up. Or it could be something else. Someone helping her build a case against Coulter. Manufacturing evidence. Can we find out? Maybe. I know some people in Denver. Let me make some calls. 2 days later, Morrison returned with information that changed everything. The lawyer Celeste had been paying specialized in document restoration and authentication. He'd been disciplined twice for ethics violations, once for helping a client forge business records, once for suborning perjury. He was exactly the kind of person you hired when you needed paperwork that looked legitimate but wasn't. This proves she forged the contract, Mara said. It suggests it, strongly, but it's not proof. We'd need testimony from the lawyer himself, and he's not going to give that up. Morrison tapped the papers. However, It gives us leverage. If we threaten to expose her connection to this lawyer, bring his history into the case, she'll know we can damage her reputation even if we can't prove the forgery outright. Is that enough? To make her think twice about pushing forward? Maybe. Morrison's expression was grim. But Mara, understand, this is a knife fight now. We're threatening to expose her publicly. She'll retaliate hard. Let her. I'm done being scared of her. Coulter walked in as she said it, took in the papers spread across the desk, the determined look on her face. What did I miss? We found a crack, Mara said. Small one, but enough to make her bleed. She explained the lawyer, the suspicious payments, the leverage it gave them. Watched Coulter process the information, saw hope war with caution in his expression. If we do this, we declare war, he said. No more subtle pressure. She'll come at us with everything. She's already doing that. At least this way we hit back. He looked at Morrison. What do you think? I think you're both crazy, and I think it's the best chance we've got. Morrison started gathering his papers. I'll draft a letter to her lawyers. Make it clear we know about the Denver connection, that we're prepared to bring it into court if they proceed with the suit. Give them 48 hours to respond. And if she calls our bluff, then we go to trial and hope a judge believes us over her. Morrison paused at the door. But my gut says she won't risk it. Her power is built on reputation. We threaten that. She has to reconsider. After he left, Coulter pulled Mara into his arms. She went willingly, exhausted and wired and terrified of what came next. Thank you, he said quietly, for fighting, for not letting me give up. I'm not doing it for honor or principle, she admitted. I'm doing it because I'm selfish, because I want this, you, the boys happy, a life that's more than running and hiding. I want it enough to fight dirty for it. Then we're well matched, because I want it too. He kissed her temple. Whatever happens, Mara, whatever she throws at us next, we face it together. Together, she agreed, and tried not to think about the 48 hours ahead, about Celeste's response, about all the ways this could still fall apart. They'd thrown down the challenge. Now they'd see if Celeste Beaumont could be beaten, or if some enemies were just too powerful to fight. The answer would come soon enough. It always did. The response came in 36 hours, not 48. A rider arrived at dawn carrying a cream-colored envelope sealed with green wax, Celeste's personal mark. Mara watched from the office window as Coulter took it, dismissed the messenger without opening it, and walked back toward the house with the kind of deliberate calm that meant he was furious. He found her still at the desk, surrounded by ledgers she'd been reviewing since 4 in the morning. Sleep had become something other people did. Her world had narrowed to numbers and strategy, and the desperate hope that they'd found a weapon strong enough to matter. Coulter set the envelope on the desk between them like it might explode. From Celeste. What does it say? Eat our house. Haven't opened it yet. Wanted you here. He picked up the letter opener, slid it under the seal. The wax cracked with a sound too loud in the quiet room. Inside was a single sheet of expensive stationery, the handwriting elegant and controlled. Coulter read it once, his face going carefully blank. Then he handed it to Mara without a word. The message was brief and devastating. Mr. Reed, your accusations regarding my legal counsel are spurious and slanderous. However, in the interest of avoiding prolonged litigation, I am prepared to offer a compromise. Marry me by the end of February, and the contract dispute disappears. All debts forgiven. The ranch remains intact. Your employees keep their positions. You have 2 weeks to accept. After that, after certs, I proceed with the suit and will additionally pursue defamation charges for the aspersions you've cast on my character and business practices. The choice is yours, but understand, this is your final opportunity for a peaceful resolution. My patience has limits. C.B. Mara set the letter down carefully, fighting the urge to crumple it into a ball and throw it across the room. She's not backing down. No, she's doubling down, threatening defamation on top of the contract suit. Coulter's hands clenched. 2 weeks. She's giving me 2 weeks to surrender completely or lose everything. The defamation threat is garbage. Morrison can fight that. Can he? We accused her of forging documents and hiring an unethical lawyer. If we can't prove it in court, that's defamation by definition. He moved to the window, stared out at the ranch he'd built. She's covered every angle. Even our leverage isn't enough. Mara stood, moved beside him. Outside, Frank was working with the twins in the corral, teaching them something about horse care. Eli laughed at something Frank said, the sound carrying faintly through the glass. They looked happy. Safe. Everything she'd wanted for them. What if we go public? She said quietly. Coulter turned. What? Not through courts, through people. Tell everyone what she's doing, the forgery, the blackmail, the threats. Let the community decide who to believe. That's social suicide, for both of us. Maybe. Or maybe people are tired of watching Celeste Beaumont manipulate everything to get what she wants. Mara met his eyes. She's counting on us being too afraid of scandal to fight back. What if we aren't? You'd be destroyed. The widow who seduced her employer and tried to turn him against his former fiancée. That's how they'd tell it. Let them. I've been poor before. I've been desperate before. I've survived worse than gossip. She touched his arm. But you haven't. The ranch hasn't. Are you willing to risk it? He was silent for a long moment, working through the implications. Then he said, Morrison would lose his mind. Probably. It could backfire completely, make us look like desperate liars. It could. We'd have to tell them everything. About us. About what's growing between us. No more pretending it's just business. I know. Coulter turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face. If we do this, if we make this public, there's no going back. Everyone will know I'm choosing you over her, over money and connections and everything Celeste represents. And if they reject that choice, reject us, then we lose anyway. But at least we lose fighting instead of folding. His thumb traced her cheekbone, gentle, despite the tension radiating through him. Mara, I need you to understand what you're signing up for. The things they'll say about you, about the boys. The rumors and judgment and hate. It'll be brutal. I know, but hiding hasn't worked. Trying to play by her rules hasn't worked. Maybe it's time to break the board completely. He kissed her then, slow and thorough, and full of everything they hadn't said aloud yet. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. Then let's burn it all down. Morrison arrived 2 hours later and did exactly what Mara predicted. He lost his mind. Absolutely not. No, this is legal insanity. He paced the office, hands gesturing wildly. You want to publicly accuse one of the wealthiest women in the territory of fraud and blackmail without proof solid enough for court? That's not strategy. That's suicide. We have the payment records to the Denver lawyer, Coulter said calmly. We have the questionable signature. We have motive. She wants the ranch and is willing to destroy me to get it. Circumstantial. All of it. In court, circumstantial isn't enough. In the court of public opinion. Morrison laughed bitterly. She'll bury you. She has friends in every newspaper, influence in every business circle. She'll spin this as a desperate man and his... He caught himself, glanced at Mara, his companion making wild accusations to avoid legitimate debt. So we do nothing? Mara asked. Let her win by default? We keep fighting legally, file motions, delay, look for actual proof of the forgery. In 2 weeks? You said yourself that's not enough time. Morrison stopped pacing, ran both hands through his hair. You're right, it's not. But going public accelerates the timeline, forces her hand. She'll file the suit immediately and push for expedited trial. We'd be in court within days, not weeks, and we'd lose because we don't have proof. What if the goal isn't to win in court? Coulter said slowly. What if it's to win in public first? Make her toxic enough that even if she gets the ranch legally, it's worthless to her? Explain. Celeste's power comes from her reputation. She's the sophisticated cattle heiress, the woman who turned her father's modest operation into an empire. People respect her, defer to her, do business with her because she's seen as smart and connected. Coulter leaned forward. But what if they see her differently? As someone who uses legal manipulation and blackmail to force men into marriage? How much of her influence survives that? Morrison considered this, skepticism warring with reluctant interest. It's vicious. It's fighting fire with fire. And if it doesn't work, you both go down in flames. We're already burning, Mara said quietly. At least this way we control the fire. The lawyer looked between them, saw the determination there, and sighed. You're both insane, but if you're going to do this, do it smart. Don't just shout accusations, tell a story. Make people understand why Celeste would do this, what she has to gain. Give them a narrative that makes sense. How? Coulter asked. Let me think. Morrison pulled out a chair, sat down heavily. You need to frame this as David versus Goliath, the self-made rancher being crushed by the wealthy heiress who can't accept rejection. Not about romance, about power and control. Make it clear she's been systematically attacking the ranch since you ended the engagement. Show the pattern. The feed contract dispute, Mara said, catching on. The supplier's pulling back, the lawsuit, it's all connected. Exactly. It's not just one vengeful action. It's a campaign that's harder to dismiss as coincidence or legitimate business. Morrison warmed to the idea despite himself. And you, Mrs. Vance, you're not the mistress. You're the bookkeeper who discovered the pattern, the one who put the pieces together and realized what Celeste was doing. Will people believe that? Some will, others won't. But it gives you a role that's not about seducing the boss. It makes you a figure in the story rather than a scandal. He looked at Coulter. You'll need to be honest about your feelings for her, but frame it as something that developed naturally after Celeste's campaign started, not the cause of the conflict. And if they think I'm lying, then we're no worse off than we are now. Morrison stood. I'll draft a statement, something you can share publicly. But Coulter, once you do this, there's no taking it back. Your relationship with Mara becomes public knowledge. The boys get dragged into this. Every aspect of your private life becomes fair game for gossip. Are you prepared for that? Coulter looked at Mara. She saw the question in his eyes, the final check before they jumped off the cliff together. She nodded, small but certain. Yes, Coulter said. We're prepared. The statement went out 3 days later, delivered simultaneously to the 2 local newspapers, the Territorial Register, and read aloud at the general store where most ranch families gathered for supplies. Morrison had crafted it carefully, balancing accusation with measured tone, specific enough to be credible, but broad enough to invite people to connect the dots themselves. Mara stood beside Coulter in the store as the proprietor read it to the assembled crowd. Her heart hammered so hard she thought everyone must hear it. The twins were with Sarah back at the ranch, safely away from whatever explosion this caused. That was the only thing that let Mara stay standing instead of running. The statement laid out the timeline. Coulter and Celeste's engagement 3 years prior. The business contract signed during that time. The engagement ending. Celeste's increasingly aggressive business tactics in the months that followed. The feed contract dispute. Suppliers suddenly pulling credit. Whisper campaigns about Reed Ranch's financial stability. Then the forged marriage contract. The lawsuit demanding $62,000, or the ranch. The threat of marriage is the only way to make it all disappear. Morrison had included copies of the payment records to the Denver lawyer, highlighted his ethics violations, let people draw their own conclusions about what those regular payments might have purchased. The final paragraph was the most dangerous. It acknowledged openly that Coulter had developed feelings for his bookkeeper, Mrs. Mara Vance, after she'd helped defend the ranch from these attacks. That he intended to marry her, not Celeste, and that he refused to let blackmail dictate his life or his choice of partner. When the proprietor finished reading, silence filled the store. Every eye turned to Coulter and Mara, standing together near the back, hands linked where everyone could see. Then someone laughed. It was Frank, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. About damn time someone called her out. That woman's been terrorizing business owners for years. Just usually they're too scared to fight back. Frank, James started, voice cautious. No, I'm saying it. Everyone here knows it's true. Celeste Beaumont gets what she wants through intimidation and legal tricks, and if you cross her, she destroys you. Reed's just the first one with enough spine to stand up and say it publicly. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some agreeing, some uncertain. A woman Mara didn't recognize spoke up. But that contract, if he signed it, he owes the money. That's just law. Read the dates, another voice called. It was the baker's wife holding her own copy of the statement. That contract was supposedly signed 3 months before the engagement ended. Why would they need a breakup penalty clause when they were still engaged? Unless someone added it later, Frank said pointedly. After the engagement ended, when it would be useful leverage. More murmurs. The crowd was dividing, people clustering into groups based on whether they believed the accusation or dismissed it. Mara watched it happen in real time. Saw the community fracturing along lines of loyalty and skepticism. Mayor Hansen pushed to the front, face red. This is slander, making accusations without proof. Mr. Reed, I expected better from you. I have proof, Coulter said calmly. Payment records, timeline inconsistencies, a pattern of behavior that speaks for itself. You have suspicions. That's not the same as proof. Then let's test it in court. Let Celeste explain those payments to a lawyer with ethics violations. Let her explain why the contract language changed. Let her produce the original document and submit it for authentication. Coulter's voice carried across the store. I'm not hiding from a trial. I'm asking people to look at the facts and decide for themselves what they believe. And conveniently dragging Miss Beaumont's name through the mud in the process, Hansen shot back, while positioning yourself as the victim. Very convenient. Is it convenient when you're about to lose everything you built? Mara heard herself say. Every head turned toward her. She fought the urge to shrink back, forced herself to keep talking. Mr. Reed could have surrendered quietly, married Miss Beaumont, kept the ranch and avoided this entire scandal. Instead, he's risking his reputation and his livelihood to fight back. That doesn't sound convenient to me. That sounds like someone who's telling the truth. Hansen's eyes narrowed. And you, Mrs. Vance, what's your stake in all this? Beyond the obvious. The implication was clear. Mara felt heat flood her face, but held her ground. My stake is that I won't watch a good man be destroyed by someone using the legal system as a weapon. That's all. That's all? Hansen's tone dripped skepticism. Nothing to do with your position in his household? Your personal interest in keeping him unmarried? Mayor Hansen, James' voice cut through the tension like a blade. You're suggesting Mrs. Vance has been manipulating Mr. Reed. I've worked with her daily for months. She saved this ranch from financial collapse. She found the evidence about Celeste's schemes when no one else was looking. If you're calling her a manipulator, you're calling her smarter than every man here who missed what she saw. Is that really the accusation you want to make? Scattered laughter broke the tension slightly. Hansen's face went redder, but he seemed to recognize he'd overstepped. I'm simply saying we should be cautious about believing accusations against a respected member of our community. Celeste's respected because people are afraid of her, Frank said flatly. Let's stop pretending otherwise. The arguments continued for another hour. People took sides. Some left in disgust at the scandal. Others stayed to argue their position. The community that had been unified under polite silence fractured into open conflict. Mara and Coulter slipped out eventually, walking back to where they'd left the wagon. Neither spoke until they were out of earshot of the store. That was brutal, Mara said finally. It's going to get worse. Coulter helped her up into the wagon seat. Hansen will go straight to Celeste. Tell her everything. She'll respond hard. I know. The boys are going to hear things, ugly things, about me, about us. Mara's voice cracked. I knew that going in. Doesn't make it easier. Coulter climbed up beside her, took her hand. We can still stop this. I can send a retraction. Say I was mistaken. Take the marriage deal. No. Mara, no. We're not stopping. We jumped off the cliff. Now we see if we can fly or if we hit the ground. She squeezed his hand. Together. That's what we said. He raised her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. Together. The ride back to the ranch was quiet, both of them processing what they'd started. War had been declared publicly. Now they waited to see who would win. Celeste's response came that evening, delivered by a lawyer Mara didn't recognize. Not Morrison, someone from her own team. The man was young, overdressed, and vibrating with barely contained aggression. Mr. Reed, Mrs. Vance. He nodded curtly to each. I'm here on behalf of Miss Celeste Beaumont to deliver formal notice. Miss Beaumont will be filing suit not only for breach of contract, but also for defamation, libel, and intentional harm to her business interests. Total damages sought, $100,000. Mara's stomach dropped. $100,000. That was impossible. She's also calling for an emergency hearing to determine whether Mrs. Vance should retain custody of her children, given questions about her moral fitness and judgment. The world tilted. What? A woman engaged in an extramarital relationship, living in a household of questionable propriety, making wild accusations to serve her own interests. These raised legitimate concerns about child welfare. The lawyer's tone suggested he didn't believe a word of it, but was enjoying the delivery anyway. The hearing is scheduled for 10 days from now. Both of you are required to appear. That's, Coulter started, fury barely contained. Legal? Entirely legal. Any concerned party can petition for a child welfare review. Miss Beaumont, as a prominent community member, certainly qualifies. He handed over a thick envelope. All the details are in there. Lovely evening to you both. He left. Mara stood frozen, the words echoing in her head. Child welfare review. Questions about her moral fitness. They could take Eli and Rowan, actually take them. She wouldn't, Mara whispered. She can't. They're my sons. She's threatening to. Coulter ripped open the envelope, scanned the documents inside. His face went progressively darker. It's all here. Formal petition. Scheduled hearing. Allegations about improper household environment. questions about your decision-making, concerns about the boy's exposure to adult conflict. This was the nuclear option, the thing she'd threatened back at the social. Mara felt like she might throw up. I have to take them and run. Tonight. Before Upor? No. Running makes you look guilty. Proves her allegations about poor judgment. Coulter grabbed her shoulders. Mara, listen to me. This is a scare tactic. She's trying to break us before the court date. It's working. Only if we let it. We fight this too. Show up at that hearing with every character witness we can find. Prove the boys are safe, healthy, happy. That you're a good mother. Who lives with a man she's not married to. Who's embroiled in a public scandal. Who started a relationship with her employer. Mara's voice rose. They're going to tear me apart, and I handed them the knife. Then we take the knife away. He pulled her close, spoke into her hair. Marry me. She went rigid. What? Marry me. Now. Before the hearing. It eliminates half the allegations, the impropriety, the questionable relationship. Makes you a respectable married woman instead of a scandal. That's insane. You can't marry me just to help my custody case. I'm not. I'm marrying you because I love you. He pulled back far enough to meet her eyes. I've loved you since you stood on that prairie with a knife in your hand, ready to fight the whole world to protect your sons. I've loved you through every late night working the books, every morning watching you with the boys, every moment of watching you be brave when you were terrified. This just moves up the timeline. Tears burned in Mara's eyes. Coulter, oh, I know it's fast. I know it's not romantic. I know you deserve better than a proposal driven by legal tactics and desperation. His hands framed her face. But I also know I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Want to raise those boys as my sons. Want to build something real out of all this chaos. So I'm asking, will you marry me? Not just to fight Celeste, but because we're better together than apart. She should say no. Should tell him he was making a mistake, that marrying her now would only make the scandal worse, that love wasn't enough to overcome everything stacked against them. But looking into his eyes, seeing the absolute certainty there, she couldn't make herself refuse. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. He kissed her, and for a moment the whole terrible situation fell away. There was just this. The two of them, choosing each other, despite the world burning down around them. Then reality crashed back. We need to do it immediately, Mara said, before Celeste can block it somehow. Tomorrow morning. Morrison can arrange it. Quick ceremony, minimum witnesses. The boys should be there, of course. It's their family too now. He held her tighter. Mara, I promise you, I won't let her take them. I won't let her take anything else from us, whatever it costs. What if the cost is too high? There is no cost too high. He said it with absolute conviction. Not for this. Not for you. They told the boys that night after dinner. Eli and Rowan sat on the bed in their room, looking between Mara and Coulter with wide eyes. We're going to get married, Coulter said simply. Tomorrow. Your mother and I. That means I'll be your stepfather. Officially. Silence. Then Eli said, voice careful, Does that mean we get to stay here? Forever? It means we're a family, Mara said. All of us. Forever. But what about the mean lady? Rowan asked. The one everyone's talking about. Jenny said she wants to hurt us. Mara shot a look at Coulter. They tried to keep the details from the boys, but of course the ranch staff talked. Children heard everything. She's trying to cause problems, Coulter said, but she's not going to succeed. We're not going to let her. Because you're getting married? Eli asked, too smart for his 7 years. Partly, but mostly because we love each other. And we love you too. And sometimes when people love each other, they fight for that, even when it's hard. Rowan looked at Mara. Do you love him, Mama? Yes, she said, the word coming easier than she'd expected. I do. And you love us too? More than anything in the world. Then okay, Rowan nodded seriously. We can fight the mean lady together. Eli wasn't as easily convinced. What if she wins? What if we have to leave? Then we leave together, Coulter said firmly. All 4 of us. But I don't think we're going to lose. I think we're going to show everyone that families like ours, built from scratch, chosen instead of born, are just as real and strong as any other kind. Promise? Eli's voice was small. Promise. The boys seemed to accept this. They went to bed quietly, whispering to each other in the dark. Mara stood in the doorway watching them, Coulter beside her. I just gave them hope, she said quietly. What if we can't deliver? Then we gave them hope anyway. That's not nothing. He put his arm around her shoulders. Get some sleep. Tomorrow we get married, and then we prepare for the hardest fight of our lives. Not exactly the romantic wedding I imagined as a girl. No, but it's real, and that's better than romance. She leaned into him, let herself take comfort in his solid presence. Tomorrow, they'd face whatever came. Tonight, she let herself believe it might actually work. The ceremony happened at dawn in Morrison's office, witnessed by the lawyer, Sarah, James, and Frank. Mara wore the blue silk dress from the social, the only nice thing she owned. Coulter wore his best suit, though he looked uncomfortable in the formal clothing. The twins stood on either side, holding hands, faces serious with the weight of the moment. The justice of the peace was an older man who'd known Coulter since childhood. He kept the ceremony brief, practical, focused on the legal requirements rather than flowery language. When he asked if they took each other as husband and wife, both answered clearly. No hesitation. No doubt. Coulter's kiss was gentle, appropriate for the audience, but Mara felt the promise in it. This wasn't just legal protection. This was real. Congratulations, Morrison said when it was done, though his tone suggested he was congratulating them on volunteering for battle rather than marriage. You're now legally husband and wife, which gives us significantly better standing at the custody hearing. When is it again? Mara asked. 8 days. I've already filed notice of the marriage with the court. It'll take some wind out of Celeste's sails, but she'll adapt. Probably pivot to arguments about the rushed timeline, suggest it's a sham marriage for legal purposes. Let her try, Coulter said. We'll prove otherwise. They celebrated quietly back at the ranch. Sarah had made a small cake, the hands gathered for a toast. It should have been joyful. Instead, it felt like the calm before a storm, everyone aware that the real fight was still ahead. That evening, another messenger arrived. Another cream-colored envelope with green wax. Coulter opened it in the office with Mara beside him. The message was shorter this time. Congratulations on your marriage. How convenient. I look forward to our day in court. CB. She's not backing down, Mara said unnecessarily. No, she's going all in. Coulter set the note aside. So do we. Tomorrow we start gathering witnesses. Everyone who can testify about the boys, about you as a mother, about our household. We show them a wall of people who believe in us. And if that's not enough, then we make it enough. He took her hand, her left hand, where a simple gold band now rested. You're my wife now. Those boys are my sons. I don't lose my family. Not to her, not to anyone. Mara looked at the ring on her finger, still strange and new. 24 hours ago, she'd been Mara Vance, widow and bookkeeper. Now she was Mara Reed, wife and mother and woman who'd somehow ended up at the center of a war she'd never wanted. But looking at Coulter's face, seeing the determination there, she found her own resolve hardening. Celeste thought they'd fold, thought the threat to the boys would break them completely. She was wrong. 8 days until the hearing. 8 days to build their case, gather their witnesses, prepare for the fight of their lives. 8 days to prove that love could stand against money and power and legal manipulation. It would have to be enough. The 8 days moved like water and stone at once. Too fast when Mara needed time to think, too slow when panic rose in her throat at 3 a.m. She and Morrison worked 16-hour shifts building their case, pulling together everyone who'd witnessed the boys' transformation at the ranch, documenting every moment that proved Mara was exactly what she claimed, a mother doing everything humanly possible to keep her children safe. Sarah testified to how the twins had arrived half-frozen and terrified, how they'd bloomed under stable care. Frank described teaching them to ride, watching them gain confidence and joy. Jenny detailed the boys' routines, bedtimes and meals and homework sessions at the kitchen table. Even the ranch hands who barely knew Mara offered statements about seeing a devoted mother who put her sons above everything else. Morrison compiled it all into a folder 3 inches thick. It's good, he said on the 6th day, reviewing their materials. Really good. But Celeste will have her own witnesses. People who'll testify about the rushed marriage, the scandal, the questionable judgment of getting involved with an employer while dependent on him for survival. Because wanting happiness is questionable judgment, Mara said bitterly. To some people? Yes. Especially when you're poor and he's wealthy, they'll say you calculated every move. Morrison's voice was gentle but honest. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm saying that's what we're facing. Coulter paced the office like a caged animal. So what do? Just take the hits and hope the judge believes our side? We tell the truth, all of it. Don't hide from the hard parts. Acknowledge them. Yes, the marriage was fast. Yes, the situation is complicated. But make them see it's also real. Morrison looked at Mara. That's your job. Show them who you are. Not perfect. Just honest. The night before the hearing, Mara couldn't sleep. She stood on the porch watching snow fall across the ranch, trying to memorize this place in case it was the last night she spent here. The boys were asleep upstairs, warm and safe, and completely unaware that tomorrow might tear their world apart again. She heard Coulter before she saw him, his footsteps heavy on the wooden planks. You should rest, he said, coming to stand beside her. Can't. My brain won't stop running scenarios. She pulled her shawl tighter. What if Morrison's wrong? What if the judge decides I'm unfit? That the boys would be better off in an orphanage or with some respectable family who doesn't carry scandal? That won't happen. You don't know that. I know you. He turned her to face him, hands firm on her shoulders. I know that you walked through a blizzard to keep those boys alive. That you took work sorting through a drunk man's chaos rather than accept charity. That you faced down Celeste Beaumont without flinching. Any judge who sees you, really sees you, will know you're exactly the mother those boys need. And if seeing isn't enough, if money and influence win anyway? Coulter was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Then we take the boys and we disappear. Go somewhere Celeste's reach doesn't extend. Start over with nothing but each other. You'd give up the ranch? In a heartbeat. If it's the ranch or you three, there's no contest. His voice was absolutely certain. I built this place from dirt and will. I can build another one. But I can't build another you. Another chance at being part of a real family. Mara felt tears prick her eyes. I never asked you to sacrifice everything for us. You didn't have to ask. That's what family means. You don't calculate the cost. You just do what needs doing. He pulled her close, and she buried her face in his chest, breathing in wool and leather and the solid reality of him. Whatever happens tomorrow, we're in it together. That's not changing. They stood like that until the cold drove them inside, holding on to each other, and the fragile hope that the world might, just this once, choose justice over power. The courthouse was smaller than Mara expected, a 2-story brick building that served 3 counties and handled everything from property disputes to criminal trials. By the time they arrived, a crowd had already gathered. News of the hearing had spread, and it seemed half the territory wanted to witness the spectacle of Coulter Reed's scandalous marriage being examined in open court. Mara held tight to Coulter's hand as they climbed the steps. The twins walked between them, dressed in their best clothes, faces solemn. They didn't fully understand what was happening, but they knew it mattered, knew their family hung in the balance. Inside, the courtroom smelled like old wood and bitter coffee. Morrison was already there, arranging documents at their table. Across the aisle, Celeste sat with 2 lawyers Mara didn't recognize, her posture perfect, her emerald dress probably costing more than the entire case. Their eyes met. Celeste's smile was small and sharp, a predator certain of the kill. Judge Catherine Hendricks entered precisely at 9, and everyone rose. She was older than Mara expected, maybe 60, with steel gray hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen every variation of human foolishness and retained the capacity to be disappointed by new examples. Be seated, she said, voice carrying authority without needing volume. We're here to review a petition regarding the custody arrangement of Eli and Rowan Vance, currently in the care of their mother, Mara Reed, formerly Vance. Miss Beaumont, your counsel may present the concerns. Celeste's lead lawyer stood, a man named Thornton with silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly wages. Your Honor, we're here because serious questions have arisen about Mrs. Reed's fitness as a guardian, specifically her pattern of making impulsive decisions that prioritize her own interests over the welfare of her children. He laid out the case methodically. The rushed marriage to an employer, the public scandal, the boys being exposed to adult conflicts and legal battles, living in a household where the relationship between the adults had developed under ethically questionable circumstances, dependency, gratitude, and power imbalance, creating a situation where true consent was debatable. Mrs. Reed entered Mr. Reed's employment while destitute and desperate, Thornton said. She became romantically involved with him while living under his roof, dependent on his charity for her children's survival. Then, when facing scrutiny for this relationship, she married him with suspicious speed. This pattern suggests someone who makes decisions based on survival instinct rather than genuine care for her children's emotional and moral well-being. Mara's hands clenched in her lap. Every word was designed to paint her as calculating and selfish, a woman who'd use anyone, even her own employer, to secure her position. Morrison stood when Thornton finished. Your Honor, what my colleague describes as suspicious could also be called resilient. Mrs. Reed is a widow who lost her husband 6 months ago. She could have given up when her wagon broke down in a blizzard. Instead, she fought to keep her children alive. When offered work, she took it and proved herself invaluable. When she fell in love, yes, in complicated circumstances, she didn't hide it. She married the man she loves, which seems like exactly the kind of stable, honest choice we should want parents to make. Honest? Thornton scoffed. She married him 8 days before this hearing. The timing alone suggests two people who wanted to formalize their commitment before facing legal scrutiny together, Morrison interrupted. Nothing about the timing indicates deception. If anything, it shows courage. Judge Hendricks raised a hand. Save the arguments for later. I want to hear from witnesses. Miss Beaumont's side first. What followed was brutal. Celeste's witnesses painted a picture of chaos and impropriety. Margaret Winters testified about the rumors circulating through town about Mara and Coulter's relationship. Mayor Hanson suggested that Coulter's judgment had been compromised by infatuation. A society matron from 2 counties over spoke about the importance of children being raised in morally upright households with clear examples of proper behavior. None of them had met Eli or Rowan. None of them had seen the boys at the ranch. But they spoke with authority about what children needed, and their expensive clothes and confident bearing gave weight to words that were all theory and no substance. Then it was Morrison's turn. He called Sarah first. The housekeeper took the stand looking uncomfortable in formal dress, but absolutely certain in her testimony. Those boys arrived here half dead, she said bluntly. Frozen, terrified, hungry. Mrs. Reed had kept them alive through circumstances that would have killed most people. Within a week at the ranch, they were different children, laughing, playing, acting like 7-year-olds should act. And Mrs. Reed's parenting? Morrison asked. Best I've seen. She's firm but kind. Makes sure they do their lessons, their chores, but also makes time to just be with them. She tucks them in every night, checks on them if they have nightmares, sits with them when they're sick. Sarah's voice was steady. That woman would walk through fire for those boys. Anyone who thinks otherwise hasn't been paying attention. Thornton's cross-examination tried to shake her. But surely you noticed the developing relationship between Mrs. Reed and your employer. The impropriety of that situation? I noticed 2 lonely people finding comfort in each other, Sarah said. Nothing improper about it. They were discreet, respectful. And they waited until after marriage to, well, that's none of your business. But they waited. More restraint than most people show. Frank testified next, describing the boys' progress learning to ride and care for horses. They're good kids, he said simply. Polite, hardworking, eager to learn. You can tell they feel safe here. Kids who don't feel safe don't laugh like those 2 do. Jenny talked about cooking with the boys, teaching them to knead bread and crack eggs. James described their curiosity about ranch operations. Every witness built a picture of children who were thriving, surrounded by adults who cared about them, and a mother who put them first. Then Morrison called Coulter. He took the stand looking uncomfortable in the formal setting, but his voice was steady when he answered Morrison's questions. When did you first meet Mrs. Reed? 4 months ago. She was dying beside a broken wagon with her 2 sons. I offered help. Why? You could have passed by like others had. Coulter's jaw tightened. Because I couldn't live with myself if I let children freeze to death when I had the means to prevent it. That's not who I am. And when did your feelings for Mrs. Reed develop into something more than employer and employee? Slowly, over time. Watching her work, seeing her with the boys, recognizing someone who matched my own values, hard work, loyalty, putting family first. He looked at Mara, and something in his expression made her chest ache. I didn't plan to fall in love with her, but I'm not sorry it happened. Mr. Reed, some have suggested you were manipulated, that Mrs. Reed took advantage of your kindness and her vulnerable position to secure a wealthy husband. What do you say to that? I'd say anyone who thinks Mara Vance is manipulative has never met her. Coulter's voice hardened. She fought me on accepting help, insisted on earning her keep, refused anything that looked like charity. The only thing she ever asked for was a chance to work, and she proved herself 10 times over. If anyone was pursuing this relationship, it was me, not her. Thornton stood for cross-examination, circling like a shark. Mr. Reed, you ended your engagement to Miss Beaumont 3 years ago. Why? Because we wanted different things. She wanted to merge our operations, create a business empire. I wanted a partner, not a merger. And Mrs. Reed provides that partnership? She does. How convenient that she appeared exactly when you needed a bookkeeper, exactly when you were vulnerable to someone offering comfort and companionship. Some might call that opportunistic timing. Some might call it fate, Coulter shot back, or luck, or the universe finally getting something right. I don't care what you call it. I know what I have, and I'm not giving it up because Celeste Beaumont can't accept that I chose someone else. The courtroom rippled with murmurs. Judge Hendricks rapped her gavel. Mr. Reed, confine yourself to answering the questions asked. Apologies, Your Honor, but the question was about timing, and my answer stands. The timing was right. That's all. Morrison called Mara last. She took the stand with her heart hammering, acutely aware of every eye in the courtroom tracking her movement. This was it. The moment where she had to convince a judge she didn't know that she deserved to keep her children. Morrison's questions were gentle, building her story piece by piece. Her marriage to Daniel, his death, the journey west that ended in disaster, Coulter's rescue, her work at the ranch, the growing feelings she'd tried to deny because they seemed impossible. Mrs. Reed, why did you marry Coulter when you did? Because I love him. Because my children love him. Because the threat of losing them made me realize that hiding what we felt, trying to be respectable and proper, wasn't protecting anyone. It was just making us all miserable. She looked at the judge directly. I married him when I did because it was the right time, not the convenient time. The right time. Thornton's cross-examination was designed to dismantle her. Mrs. Reed, you've been widowed for 6 months. Some might say that's not enough time to grieve properly before pursuing a new relationship. Some people aren't trying to keep 2 children alive through a frontier winter with no resources, Mara said. Grief is a luxury. I couldn't afford it then. I still can't. But that doesn't mean I didn't love my husband or don't honor his memory. Yet, you're asking this court to believe you genuinely love Mr. Reed after only 4 months of acquaintance. I'm asking this court to believe I know my own heart. I'm 31 years old, Mr. Thornton. I've been married before. I understand the difference between gratitude and love, between security and affection. What I feel for Coulter is real. It's also none of this court's business unless it affects my ability to parent my children, which it doesn't. Doesn't it? You've exposed them to scandal, to adult conflicts, I've exposed them to a household where adults work hard, treat each other with respect, and don't lie about their feelings. Mara interrupted. I've shown them that family isn't just blood, that love can be chosen, that sometimes the right thing to do is fight for what matters instead of accepting what's easy. If that's damaging them, then I'll accept that judgment. But I don't believe it is. Thornton tried several more angles, but Mara held her ground. She wasn't perfect. She'd made mistakes. But she was a good mother, and everyone who'd actually met her children could see it. Finally, Judge Hendricks called for closing arguments. Morrison stood first. Your Honor, this case is simple. A mother kept her children alive against impossible odds. She found stable work and a safe home. She fell in love with a good man who treats her sons like his own. Now, a wealthy woman who can't accept romantic rejection is using the legal system to punish that mother by threatening her children. That's not justice. That's weaponized privilege. Mrs. Reed isn't perfect, but she's exactly what those boys need, someone who will fight for them, no matter the cost. I ask that you dismiss this petition and let this family be. Thornton's closing was equally forceful. Your Honor, intentions don't matter. Results matter. Mrs. Reed has placed her children in the middle of a public scandal. She's made decisions based on emotion rather than reason. She's created an unstable environment where adult conflicts take precedence over children's needs. The boys may appear happy now, but what happens when this rushed marriage fails? When Mr. Reed realizes he was manipulated? These children deserve stability, not drama. We ask that you place them temporarily with a neutral family while Mrs. Reed demonstrates she can provide appropriate long-term care. Judge Hendricks was silent for a long moment after both men sat down. She looked at the documents before her, then at Mara, then at the twins sitting in the front row between Sarah and Frank. I'm going to ask those boys to approach the bench, she said finally. Morrison started to object, but Hendricks waved him off. I'm not questioning them formally. I just want to look at them. Eli and Rowan walked forward holding hands, looking small and terrified. They stood before the judge's elevated desk, craning their necks to see her face. Eli and Rowan, is that right? Hendricks asked, voice gentler than it had been all day. They nodded in unison. Are you happy living at the ranch? Another nod. Do you like Mr. Reed? Yes, ma'am, Eli said, finding his voice. He teaches us things. How to ride and rope and fix things. He's he's nice to Mama. And your mother, does she take good care of you? She's the best mama, Rowan said, earnest and absolute. She keeps us safe. She loves us even when we're bad. Something shifted in the judge's expression. She looked at the boys for another long moment, then nodded. Go sit down, boys. Thank you. After they returned to their seats, Hendricks addressed the courtroom. I've heard a lot of testimony today about propriety and scandal and what children need, but I've been a judge for 30 years and I've learned that children need very simple things. Safety, food, someone who loves them unconditionally. I see children who have all three. I see a mother who's fought like hell to provide that, even when circumstances were stacked against her. She looked at Celeste. Miss Beaumont, I appreciate your concern for child welfare, but I suspect this petition has less to do with those boys and more to do with your feelings about Mr. Reed's marriage. That's not appropriate use of this court. Celeste's face went white, then red. Your Honor, I'm not finished. Mrs. Reed, your situation is unconventional. Your timeline is fast. Some of your choices might not be what I would recommend, but unconventional isn't the same as unfit. Fast isn't the same as wrong. And from what I've seen, those boys are exactly where they belong. She picked up her gavel. The petition is denied. Custody remains with Mrs. Reed, case closed. The gavel fell and the sound echoed through the courtroom like thunder. For a moment, Mara couldn't process it. She sat frozen, the words not quite reaching her brain. Then Coulter's arm came around her shoulders, and Morrison was grinning, and the twins were running toward her, and she understood. They'd won. She dropped to her knees and caught the boys as they crashed into her, wrapping them in her arms and burying her face in their hair. It's okay, she whispered over and over. We're okay. We're staying together. I told you, Eli said, muffled against her shoulder. I told you we'd win. Behind them, Celeste stood abruptly, her face a mask of rage barely contained. She said something sharp to her lawyers, then swept toward the exit without looking back. Her moment of control was over. The power she'd wielded so confidently had failed against something as simple as a mother's love, and the truth told plainly. Outside the courthouse, the crowd that had gathered to watch the spectacle now parted uncertainly. Some looked disapproving. Others seemed thoughtful, perhaps reconsidering the stories they'd believed. Frank clapped Coulter on the back hard enough to stagger him. Sarah hugged Mara and the twins together, her weathered face wet with tears. You did it, she said. You actually did it. We did it, Mara corrected. All of us. Morrison joined them, looking exhausted but triumphant. That was closer than I wanted, but Hendricks came through. She's fair. Doesn't let money buy outcomes. What about Celeste's other lawsuit? Coulter asked. The contract dispute? Without the custody threat as leverage, I suspect she'll drop it. Fighting in court means exposing her tactics publicly. She won't want that. Morrison's smile was sharp. And if she doesn't drop it, we have enough ammunition now to make her regret proceeding. They rode back to the ranch in the wagon, the twins chattering excitedly about what the judge had said, how they'd been brave, what they wanted for dinner to celebrate. Mara listened with half her attention, the other half still processing what they'd survived. You all right? Coulter asked quietly. I don't know, I think so. It doesn't feel real yet. It will. Give it time. He took her hand, threaded their fingers together. We're married. The boys are safe. Celeste lost. That's real enough for now. That night, after the boys were asleep and the house had settled into quiet, Mara and Coulter stood on the same porch where he'd first offered her shelter months ago. Snow fell soft and steady, covering the world in white. I keep thinking about that day, Mara said. When you found us on the prairie, how close we came to dying out there. Don't think about it. I have to, because if you'd ridden past like everyone else, none of this would exist. The boys wouldn't be upstairs dreaming about horses. I wouldn't be standing here as your wife. We'd just be 3 more people who didn't make it west. But I didn't ride past. And you did make it. He pulled her close, his chin resting on top of her head. That's what matters. Not what almost happened. What did happen? We got lucky. We got brave. There's a difference. He was quiet for a moment, then said, You know what I learned through all this? That the things worth having are worth fighting dirty for. That love isn't about being proper or respectable. It's about showing up even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That sounds like something you'd say to the boys. It's something I'd say to anyone who'll listen, including myself. He turned her to face him. I spent years after Celeste building walls, keeping people at distance, telling myself that being alone was safer than risking getting hurt again. Then you showed up, half frozen and fierce, and blew those walls apart without even trying. I didn't mean to. I know. That's what made it work. He kissed her forehead, soft and lingering. Thank you for fighting, for not giving up when it would have been easier. I had something worth fighting for. That makes it simple. The lawsuit was dropped 3 weeks later with no explanation. One day it existed, the next Morrison received formal notice of withdrawal. Celeste apparently decided that public battle wasn't worth the risk to her reputation. She retreated to her own ranch and her own empire, leaving Reed Ranch alone. Life found its rhythm. Mara continued managing the accounts, bringing order to what had once been chaos. The boys grew taller, stronger, more confident. Coulter taught them everything he knew about ranching, about responsibility, about what it meant to build something that lasted. Spring came, and with it the thaw. The prairie that had nearly killed them transformed into rolling grassland dotted with wildflowers. Mara stood at the fence line one morning, watching the boys help Frank move cattle, and realized she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt afraid. "You look thoughtful," Coulter said, joining her. "Just thinking about how much has changed, how different everything is from a year ago. Better or worse?" "Better, so much better it almost scares me." "Why does better scare you?" She considered the question. "Because I spent so long just trying to survive that I forgot happiness was possible. Now that I have it, I keep waiting for something to take it away." "Nothing's taking it away. Not if I have anything to say about it." He put his arm around her waist. "We built this, Mara, out of nothing but stubbornness and each other. That's not something that breaks easily." By summer, Mara was pregnant. The discovery came as a surprise, even though it shouldn't have been. She told Coulter one evening after the boys were asleep, suddenly nervous despite everything they'd been through together. "I'm going to have a baby," she said. "Our baby." His face went through several expressions too fast to track, landing on something like wonder. "You're sure?" "As sure as I can be." Sarah confirmed it. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. "A baby. We're having a baby. Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't cover it. He struggled for words. "I'm everything. Terrified and excited and grateful and scared. All of it at once." They told the boys the next morning. Eli's response was cautious acceptance. Rowan's was pure excitement about being a big brother. Both wanted to know if it would be a boy or a girl, when it would arrive, whether they'd have to share their room. "You'll have a little brother or sister by winter," Mara told them, "and we'll figure out the room situation when the time comes." "Will you love the baby more than us?" Eli asked quietly. Mara's heart broke a little. "No, never. I'll love the baby differently, but not more. You two are my first children, the ones I fought hardest to protect. That doesn't change just because we're adding someone new." "Promise?" "Promise." The months passed. Mara's belly grew. The ranch prepared for another winter, but this time there was no fear in it. They had supplies, resources, a solid house with thick walls. The boys helped Coulter stockpile firewood and check the fences. Sarah and Jenny prepared for the baby's arrival with the efficiency of women who'd delivered dozens of children between them. In November, on a night when the first real snow of winter fell, Mara went into labor. It was faster than her first delivery, less frightening. She'd done this before, knew what to expect. Sarah and Jenny attended her while Coulter paced outside the bedroom, wearing a path in the hallway floor. When the baby finally arrived, a girl, healthy and loud, Sarah wrapped her and handed her to Mara. "Perfect," she pronounced. "Absolutely perfect." Coulter was allowed in then, looking pale and terrified. He approached the bed like he was walking on ice, afraid one wrong step would shatter everything. When he saw the baby, his daughter, his face crumpled. "She's so small," he whispered. "She'll grow. They always do." Mara shifted the bundle so he could see her face better. "You want to hold her?" "I don't know how." "You'll learn. Sit down." He sat on the edge of the bed, and Mara transferred the baby carefully into his arms. He held her like she was made of glass, staring at her tiny face with absolute awe. "We need a name," he said finally. They'd discussed options for months without settling on anything. But looking at the baby now, wrapped in quilts in Coulter's arms while snow fell outside, Mara knew. "Grace," she said. "We name her Grace." "Grace Reed." Coulter tested it, smiled. "Yes, that's right." The boys met their sister the next morning, tiptoeing into the room with exaggerated care. Rowan was immediately enchanted. Eli was more reserved, studying the baby like she was a puzzle he needed to solve. "She's really ours?" he asked. "To keep?" "Really ours," Mara confirmed. "Your sister, forever." "Then I guess she's all right," Eli said, which was high praise from a 7-year-old boy. The winter passed with the baby in the house. Sleepless nights and constant feeding and the particular chaos that came with infants. But it was good chaos. The kind that meant life continuing, family growing, something built from scratch becoming something permanent. One evening in late winter, Mara found Coulter in the office. Not working, but just sitting at the desk, looking at papers scattered across the surface. She recognized them. The documents from Celeste's lawsuit, the forged contract, all the evidence of the battle they'd fought. "You keeping those as a reminder?" she asked. "No." Deciding whether to burn them or file them away. He looked up at her. "Morrison says I should keep everything in case she tries again, but I'm tired of looking at it, tired of giving her space in my head." "Then burn it. All of it. Start fresh." Mara moved behind him, put her hands on his shoulders. "We won, Coulter. We built something she couldn't destroy. That's enough." He gathered the papers, carried them to the fireplace in the main room. Mara, the boys, even Sarah and Frank came to watch as he fed the documents into the flames. The fire consumed Celeste's threats, turning them to ash and smoke. When the last page had burned, Coulter dusted off his hands. "There, done." He looked at Mara. "No more looking back. Only forward." "Forward," she agreed. Spring came again, and with it the anniversary of the day Coulter had found them on the prairie. A full year of life at Reed Ranch. A full year of building something from nothing. They marked it quietly. No celebration, just acknowledgement. Mara stood at the fence line again, watching the boys play with Frank's dog while Grace napped in her carrier. The prairie stretched out before her, beautiful and harsh and indifferent to human struggle. A year ago it had nearly killed them. Now it was just landscape, something to observe without fear. "What are you thinking?" Coulter asked, joining her like he always did. "That we made it. Against odds that should have crushed us. We actually made it." "We did, though it wasn't easy." "Nothing worth having is." She leaned against him. "You know what I learned? That family isn't about blood or circumstances or doing everything perfectly. It's about showing up, choosing each other every day even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." "Sounds like something you'd tell the children." "Maybe I will. When they're old enough to understand it." She watched Eli help Rowan climb a fence, the older twin patient and protective. "They're good boys. They're going to be good men." "They will. Because they have you as an example, someone who fought for them when it mattered most." Grace woke with a small cry, and Mara lifted her from the carrier, settling her against her shoulder. The baby looked around with wide eyes, taking in the world like everything was new and fascinating, which it was, Mara supposed. When you were 6 months old, everything was a discovery. "What do you think her life will be like?" Coulter asked, touching Grace's tiny hand with one finger. "Better than mine was. Safer. More certain." Mara kissed her daughter's head. "But also harder in ways I can't predict. The world changes. We can't protect her from everything." "We can try? We can teach her to protect herself, to be brave like her brothers, to fight for what matters." She looked at Coulter. "That's the best we can do, I think. Give them the tools and hope they use them well." As summer deepened, the ranch thrived. Cattle prices were strong. The accounts balanced. Suppliers who'd pulled back during Celeste's campaign returned, recognizing that Reed Ranch was stable and profitable. Life found its rhythm. The daily work of ranching, the chaos of raising 3 children, the quiet moments stolen between crisis. One afternoon, a rider approached the ranch. Mara watched from the office window as Coulter went to meet him, exchanged words, then took an envelope. Her stomach clenched. Envelopes never meant good news. But when Coulter came inside, he was smiling. "What is it?" she asked. "Letter from Morrison. The territorial governor signed off on the adoption paperwork. It's official. Eli and Rowan are legally mine. They're Reed boys now, not just Vance boys living in my house." Mara's eyes burned. "You adopted them?" "Started the process months ago. Didn't want to say anything until it was done in case something went wrong." He set the letter on the desk. "But it's done now. They're mine. Ours. No question, no ambiguity. Full legal adoption." "They're going to be so happy. They already know they're part of this family. This just makes it official." He pulled her close. "Same as marrying you made us official. It's all just paperwork catching up to what's already real." They told the boys that evening. Eli cried, though he tried to hide it. Rowan asked approximately 50 questions about what being adopted meant. Both wanted to know if they could call Coulter father now instead of Mr. Reed or Coulter. "You can call me whatever feels right," he told them. "There's no rules, just whatever makes sense to you." Rowan tried father immediately and never looked back. Eli stuck with Coulter for another month before slowly, carefully switching to Pa. The first time he used it naturally, not thinking about it, Mara saw Coulter's eyes go bright before he turned away. That fall, a journalist from Denver came through, writing a series on successful frontier ranches. He interviewed Coulter for hours, took notes on the operation, and seemed particularly interested in the scandal from the previous year. "I heard there was quite a legal battle," he said. "Some dispute with Celeste Beaumont?" "There was. It's resolved now." Coulter's tone made it clear the topic was closed. Still, must have been difficult, fighting someone with her resources. What was difficult was watching someone try to use the legal system as a weapon. But justice worked like it's supposed to. That's the story, if you want one worth printing. The article ran a month later, focusing on Reed Ranch's growth and management practices. It mentioned Coulter's marriage to his bookkeeper and the subsequent custody challenge, but framed it as a footnote, something overcome rather than something defining. Celeste's name appeared once in a paragraph about business partnerships that had dissolved. Mara read it and felt something release in her chest. They weren't the scandal anymore. They were just a family that had faced challenges and survived. Years passed. The twins grew into young men who knew ranching and numbers with equal facility. Grace became the kind of daughter who could ride and rope as well as her brothers, who demanded equal treatment and got it. 2 more children joined them, another boy and a girl, filling the house with noise and chaos and the particular exhaustion that came with a large family. Mara's hair showed gray at the temples before she was 40. Coulter's face gained lines around his eyes. The ranch expanded, prospered, became known as one of the finest operations in 3 territories. They employed 60 people, supported local businesses, built a school that served ranch families for 50 miles. But the core of it, the thing that mattered, stayed the same. A family built from nothing. From a widow dying beside a broken wagon and a man who'd chosen mercy over convenience. From courage and stubbornness and the refusal to let fear or circumstance dictate their future. One winter evening, when Mara was 45 and feeling every year of it, she stood on that same porch where so much of their story had unfolded. Grace, now 15 and full of opinions, was arguing with Eli about something in the house. Rowan was in the barn with the youngest children, teaching them to care for a new colt. Inside, Coulter worked on account books, reading glasses perched on his nose. It was ordinary, completely, beautifully ordinary. Sarah joined her, moving slower than she used to, but still sharp as ever. "You look satisfied," she observed. "I am. Is that allowed?" "After what you've survived?" "I'd say it's earned." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "You know what I remember most? That first night you arrived. You looked half dead and completely terrified, but you weren't broken. Some people break when the world gets hard. You didn't." "I had the boys. Breaking wasn't an option. It's always an option. You chose not to take it." Sarah touched her arm. "That's worth remembering. On the hard days, and there will still be hard days, remember that you're the kind of person who fights, who builds, who makes family out of nothing but will and love. Is this your version of wisdom now that you're old?" "I've always been wise. You just weren't ready to hear it." But Sarah smiled. "Go inside. Be with your husband and your chaos. I'll watch the sunset alone." Mara went inside to find Coulter closing the ledger. He looked up when she entered, and his face softened the way it always did when he saw her. 20 years hadn't changed that. "Everything balanced?" she asked. "Close enough? We're profitable, the books are clean, no disasters on the horizon." He set the glasses aside. "In other words, boring and perfect." "I like boring. So do I. Turns out boring is underrated." He pulled her onto his lap, and she settled there like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Grace wants to go to university, study law." "I know, she told me." "Should we let her? Can we stop her?" He laughed. "Fair point. That girl got all your stubbornness and none of my sense of self-preservation." "Your sense of self-preservation?" Mara raised an eyebrow. "You're the one who stopped for a dying widow on the prairie. Married her against all advice. Fought a legal battle you couldn't afford to lose. Where was your self-preservation?" Apparently, I left it somewhere around the time I fell in love with you. He kissed her temple. No regrets, though. Not one. Not even when we're exhausted and broke and the children are disasters? Especially then, because those are the moments that prove what we built is real. Anyone can be happy when things are easy. We're happy when things are hard. That's different. Later, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into quiet, Mara stood in the doorway of each bedroom checking on sleeping faces. Eli and Rowan in one room, still sharing though they could each have their own. Grace in another, surrounded by books. The younger children piled together like puppies. 5 children. 5 lives that wouldn't exist without the choices she and Coulter had made. Without that moment on the prairie when he'd chosen mercy. Without her choosing to fight for happiness instead of just survival. She found Coulter in their bedroom, standing at the window looking out at the ranch spread beneath the stars. She joined him, fitting against his side like a puzzle piece finding its place. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I built this place to prove I could. To show I was more than my father's failures. To matter." He was quiet for a moment. "But that's not what makes it worth anything. You and the children, that's what matters. The rest is just property. It's more than property, it's legacy. Proof that people who start with nothing can build something that lasts. Our legacy isn't the ranch, it's them." He nodded toward the house full of sleeping children. "Everything we survived, everything we fought for, it only matters because they exist, because we gave them a chance to grow up safe and loved and strong." Mara thought about Eli and Rowan on the prairie, about how close they'd come to being nothing but 3 more casualties of a harsh winter. About Grace and the younger children who would never have been born if Coulter had ridden past that broken wagon. About the hundreds of small choices that had led to this moment. "We got lucky," she said. "We made our own luck. There's a difference." He turned to face her fully. "Mara Reed, I would stop on that prairie again. I would offer shelter again. I would fall in love and fight and risk everything again, every single time. You know why?" "Why?" "Because this..." He gestured at the ranch, the house, the sleeping children. "This is what life is supposed to be. Not perfect, not easy, just real. Built by people who refuse to quit." She kissed him, slow and deep and full of 20 years of choosing each other. When she pulled back, her forehead rested against his. "Thank you," she whispered, "for stopping, for everything after. Thank you for surviving long enough for me to find you." They stood like that, 2 people who'd started with nothing and built everything, watching stars wheel overhead and feeling the solid reality of the life they'd created. Outside, the prairie stretched endless and indifferent, but inside, warmth and family and love turned a simple house into something far greater. Home. Built from frozen mercy and desperate courage and the stubborn belief that people could choose their own destiny if they fought hard enough. That was the legacy. Not land or cattle or money, but the simple truth that love, real, chosen, fought for love, could survive anything the world threw at it. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.